Welcome back everyone, I'm Nick930, and today I want to share with you the complete history of Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto is an open-world action-adventure series, published by Take-Two Interactive and created by Rockstar North, formerly known as DMA Design Limited. In each game, players assume the role of a unique protagonist, who find themselves tangled up in the criminal underworld, and need to complete a series of felonious acts around a fictional interpretation of a major metropolitan area. The series is best known for its massive contribution to the open-world video game genre, with highly interactive, large-scale environments that offer an unprecedented level of immersion and realism. But it's for the same reason that the series is often the focus of intense scrutiny and controversy, with its no-holds-barred approach to its adult themes and violence being falsely attributed to the moral failings of American society in the 21st century. But this false equivalency has not dissuaded consumers in the slightest, and has instead only fueled interest in the series further, making Grand Theft Auto not just an enjoyable open-world experience, but a worldwide cultural phenomenon, and one of the most successful video game franchises of all time. So how exactly did this landmark action-adventure series get its start? And what about it has kept it relevant nearly 25 years later? Well, to answer that, let's start by taking it way back to the origin of the series' creators. In 1984, a small group of like-minded computer enthusiasts met up at a computer club in Dundee, Scotland. Club members in regular attendance included Dave Jones, an ex-Timex employee who was studying systems engineering, his fellow classmate Steve Hammond, a 14-year-old Mike Daly, and Russell Kay, who had been working with Dave on a prototype for a game for the ZX Spectrum. The group, known as the Kingsway Amateur Computer Club, expressed a deep interest in computer game development, and regularly paired off on projects to take advantage of their respective skill sets, often sharing critical programming techniques along the way. But it wasn't until Dave's sci-fi shooter Menace that things really started to take a turn. Tired of building games for Spectrum computers like his colleagues, Dave, along with another of his classmates, Tony Smith, tinkered with a game for the Amiga instead, which allowed for more detailed spaceship designs and more complex parallax backgrounds. The game was heavily influenced by the likes of Konami's Salamander, that at the time was only available to play at the arcade. So, providing that type of experience to a home computer was a big deal, and caught the attention of the Liverpool-based game studio Psygnosis, who agreed to publish Dave's game under their banner. With a publisher now lined up, Dave founded his new studio, DMA Design, which he named after a line in a programming manual for his Amiga 1000. And after several years of development, he released his first successful game, Menace. Menace was a turning point for the group of young programmers, as they realized that there was some serious money to be made in the emerging game development space. At the time, game development was not considered a real profession. Computer gaming was already so niche that developing games for it was seen as more of a hobby than an actual career option. But as the first checks started to trickle in, Dave saw potential and set up shop in a tiny upstairs office space in downtown Dundee. It was around this same time that Mike, Russell, Steve, Tony, and newcomers Gary Timmons and Scott Johnston were brought on as full-time developers for DMA, with some even leaving behind their old jobs and academic plans. Before long, the studio was working on several more games for Psygnosis, most of which were some form of sci-fi shooter. But as Scott began to animate little human enemies for one of his projects, he unknowingly set off a chain of events that would change DMA forever. These little guys are the Lemmings, a short stack of pixels that players would spend years navigating through treacherous puzzle chambers using an assortment of carefully curated tools. The Lemmings started off as a sort of running gag, with Mike Daly and Gary Timmons sharing a couple silly animations of the creatures getting into trouble one day. But after Psygnosis got a glimpse of the characters in action, they were sold on the idea, and the studio entered into full development on a dedicated game starring the suicidal rodents. Lemmings became one of the studio's first big collaborative efforts, with Mike, Dave, Russell, Scott, and Gary all designing as many levels as they could, and even challenged each other to see who could make the most difficult level. It got to the point where they were all masters at the game, and were solving some of the most difficult chambers in record times, which only pushed them to create more ingenious puzzles as a result. Finally, in 1991, DMA released the original Lemmings game, and were immediately met with a surprisingly strong response. Within only the first day, Lemmings had sold well over 55,000 copies, a figure that Mike Daly claims would equate to about 15 million units sold back in 2006, and exponentially more when adjusted for today's metrics. Lemmings overnight became a cultural phenomenon all its own, and skyrocketed DMA's popularity through the roof, even drawing the attention of Nintendo, who saw major potential in the small Scottish development team. Following this incredible success, DMA invested in some major upgrades. They had recently moved out of their tiny upstairs office to a much larger space in an office park near the old university, and had brought on several new employees to handle their many ongoing projects. But now that they were raking in some real money, they decided to expand the operation, and occupied 2 new rooms in the same office complex, including one that they would use for sophisticated motion and audio capture technology. They then spent the better part of the next 3 years building follow-up titles to the beloved Lemmings, with sequel after sequel being churned out, each with a familiar, positive response from audiences. But then, in 1993, Sony made a surprise acquisition of Psygnosis to bulk up their upcoming console division, and along with it, the entire Lemmings intellectual property, leaving DMA without a publisher or their signature creation. However, this turned out to be more of a blessing in disguise. The folks at DMA were burned out on Lemmings and saw this as a golden opportunity to finally return to more mature content. So they turned their attention to the newer 3DO multiplayer console platforms, hoping to build a game that would take advantage of their more powerful components. But after receiving an offer from Nintendo to work on their upcoming Ultra 64 system instead, they quickly transitioned over to an ambitious 3D action-adventure game called Body Harvest. Body Harvest was unlike anything DMA had built before. It was one of their earlier attempts at making a fully realized 3D environment, while also reintroducing their love of more mature and violent sci-fi action. And it was even a featured title used to help advertise the N64's capabilities prior to release. But Nintendo was, unsurprisingly, not on board with Body Harvest's more adult themes. They fell in love with DMA's cute and lovable Lemmings characters, and were expecting the studio to deliver something along those lines. So despite plenty of effort from both sides to compromise, the title ultimately failed to meet the N64's launch window, and DMA had the game published by Midway instead, effectively grounding their relationship with Nintendo before it had ever gotten off the ground. This would inevitably prove to be a critical step for the young Scottish studio, as their supposed moral depravity would be fundamental in securing their next big publisher. In enter the Hauser brothers, whose love of Hollywood action films and the music industry helped pave the way for a full-time gig working at a new experimental branch of BMG Entertainment in London, with an emphasis on the emerging video game space. At first, the two brothers didn't really see much potential in this area. They didn't consider video games to be all that cool or exciting, as the biggest games at the time were geared towards children. But that all changed when Dave Jones stopped by their office in '95 to pitch a unique multiplayer action-adventure game that involved criminals racing around a city being chased by the cops. This project, given the working title Race and Chase, was originally prototyped by Mike Daly, who struggled for months to emulate the 3D design of Clockwork Knight to function within the confines of a fully interactive metropolis. Eventually, Mike was forced to redesign the game from a new top-down perspective instead, with the rear wall being textured to look like the city streets, and elongated prisms being used to simulate buildings. With the camera perspective now locked in, Mike and Dave worked together to incorporate some rough driving mechanics, along with camera scrolling routines and traffic scripts to help better visualize what the game would play like. But after weeks of playtesting around the office, they realized that the game just wasn't any fun. They initially intended to have players select between 2 teams, the cops or the robbers, and engage in high-speed pursuits across the city. But this concept was quickly abandoned after they realized how boring it was to play on the cop team. Having to obey traffic laws slowed down the pacing considerably, and trying to dodge pedestrians at crosswalks was nearly impossible due to the limited camera perspective. Suddenly, a light bulb went off. Why not have players control the robbers exclusively? This changed everything. Suddenly, the sidewalks made sense to drive on. and pedestrians went from being annoying obstacles to potential bonus points. From here, the ideas started to pour in, like having fire trucks respond to fires, and then being able to steal those fire trucks, and switch on their sirens and clear traffic. It was at this point that Dave Jones saw real potential in the project and pitched the game to the Houser brothers, who were so enamored with its open-world nature that they agreed to publish it under BMG Interactive, on the sole condition that the game be renamed into Grand Theft Auto. Now that the core concept was nailed down, the real work could begin. Development for the original Grand Theft Auto was messy to say the least. The engine that Mike had built was incredibly unstable, with an insurmountable amount of bugs and glitches, coupled with frequent crashes that made the map design process nearly impossible. They ended up having to draw each of the game's city streets by hand, using massive pieces of graph paper that barely fit on their desks, and when they finished, they painstakingly transferred the designs over to the engine itself. But even after getting the cities up and running, they ran into an even more frustrating realization. The game still wasn't fun to play. Most of the missions involved boring delivery objectives, and they struggled for months to find a way to make them more exciting, with things like power-ups and crazy weapons doing little to improve the feel. Then, one day, one of the game's many glitches caused some of the AI-controlled police vehicles to relentlessly smash into the player's car instead of just pulling them over as intended. It was almost as if they were magnetized to the player, refusing to give up the pursuit. It was so much fun to escape from that, rather than fixing it, the developers decided instead to make it a core gameplay feature, giving rise to Grand Theft Auto's signature wanted level system that continues to define the series to this day. But GTA's intense car chases weren't its only big selling point. Ahead of the game's release, the Houser brothers came up with an ingenious idea to help boost the game's initial sales, and hired ex-publicist Max Clifford to tip off major news outlets regarding the game's vile and immoral nature. The media took the bait, and before long, Grand Theft Auto began to flood newspaper headlines, scaring parents into shielding their vulnerable children from the exciting new action game set to come out soon that they probably would have never heard about otherwise. The bait and switch almost worked too well, with BGM Interactive threatening to cancel production of the game on numerous occasions, fearing that the negative backlash might hurt their brand. But the team at DMA convinced them otherwise, confident that they had a real winner on their hands, and in the fall of 1997, DMA released the very first Grand Theft Auto on DOS and Windows platforms, with additional ports for the Sony PlayStation and Game Boy Color following shortly after. The original Grand Theft Auto kicks off in a fictionalized interpretation of New York City called Liberty City. Players assume the role of one of 8 preset characters, each with their own distinctive clothing, skin, and hair color, and are tasked with completing various criminal jobs around town to earn money and progress further in the story. At first, players take on job opportunities from the Mafia, which usually involve taxiing characters from point to point or delivering an unspecified package. After earning their trust, the Mafia then brings the player in on some more lucrative opportunities, like serving as the getaway driver for a major bank job. But when things get too hot, the player is sent across the country to a fictionalized interpretation of San Francisco called San Andreas, and later reimagined Miami called Vice City, where they proceed to meet new criminal organizations and perform a series of increasingly more deadly jobs for them, in exchange for money to progress further. It's a pretty basic story design, with some repetitive mission objectives and a forgettable plot. But gamers picking up GTA back in '97 were too distracted with the game's potential for mayhem to care. GTA gives players all the tools to wreak havoc across its 3 available cities in any way that they see fit. They can, for example, run across sidewalks and streets, dodging traffic along the way. Or they can alternatively steal a nearby vehicle, even those already occupied by AI-controlled drivers. The main goal throughout the course of the game is to earn a set amount of cash in each city, either by completing the structured missions accepted at payphones, or by committing specific crimes like smashing into other cars, flattening groups of pedestrians, or even killing police officers using a small but powerful arsenal of weapons. Available firearms in the game include a handgun, a rapid-fire machine gun, a powerful rocket launcher, and the flamethrower. And each weapon has a limited set of ammunition that can be replenished by walking over any weapon icon of the same type hidden throughout the environment. Also hidden in each level environment are specific kill frenzy challenges that task the player with killing a set number of pedestrians within a strict time limit to earn a special bonus reward. However, the action on foot is only half of the GTA experience. The other half is spent behind the wheel of any of the 50-some vehicles available in the game. These vehicles range from small and speedy sports cars to much larger trucks, buses, and tanks. And to make the experience feel more realistic, most of the cars and trucks even come equipped with a working radio station, complete with its own set of songs and fictional DJ. As players cruise down the road, smashing into cars and gunning down civilians, they'll also need to contend with the game's Most Wanted system that will send endless waves of increasingly more aggressive police after the player to put a stop to their heinous acts. The player's wanted level status is denoted by the small, digitized policeman heads at the top of the screen. And if a player continues to break the law, more powerful police forces will arrive, making it more challenging for the player to escape. To drop this wanted level, players have two options. They can either drive to a local respray shop and pay to have their car disguised, instantly removing any wanted status. Or they can alternatively find a rare bribe token hidden in the game world that will call off the police without the player needing to pay anything. However, this is easier said than done. The police at higher wanted levels can be extremely dangerous, setting up roadblocks and even arming themselves with body armor and fully automatic weapons, making them extremely lethal when on foot. And this is a big deal because getting killed in this game is the last thing that the player wants. Unlike more modern entries to the series, the original GTA features limited lives to complete chapters. And if a player fails to earn enough money before losing their lives, then they'll be sent back to the results screen and are forced to start the game from scratch. It's a remarkably challenging experience, with some insanely tight time limits for missions, and extremely low time to kill. But this simultaneously made reaching higher wanted levels even more exciting, as any wrong move could result in an instant death. If that wasn't enough, the original GTA also offered its own form of competitive multiplayer, with players able to play locally using a wired modem connection to either race or battle it out across the city. But despite all of its efforts to make the experience as ludicrously fun and enjoyable as possible, the end result still fell short of meeting the expectations of critics. Reviewers often complained about the game's awkward camera systems, and found the gameplay to be more frustrating than enjoyable. But the most common complaints received concerned the game's outdated visuals, that paled in comparison to other late 90s games on the PlayStation. Still, despite its visual shortcomings and its arguably shoddy gameplay design, GTA still managed to drum up some impressive sales numbers, with over 1 million copies sold by the year 2000. The Houser brothers' clever marketing scheme paid off perfectly, and made GTA the game that parents wanted to shield their kids from. And now that the title had its reputation, both DMA and its publisher were quick to move on a sequel. While all of this was going on, a new beast was stirring beneath the surface. In 1996, Take-Two Interactive, an American video game publisher based in New York, decided to take their company public, and used the additional funding to begin an aggressive acquisition campaign, starting with some lesser-known publishers like GameTech in 1997. But the big news came in the early months of 1998, when Take-Two decided to purchase BMG's video game division, with the ultimate end goal of acquiring the newly established Grand Theft Auto property. In the resulting buyout, several of the higher-ups at BMG Interactive, including the two Houser brothers, were relocated to a new office space in New York. And within a year, they announced the formation of the publisher's first in-house gaming division, Rockstar Games, a name that reflected the Houser brothers' past ambitions to be rock stars. Meanwhile, back in Dundee, DMA Design were dealing with a completely different acquisition. Soon after the completion of the first GTA, DMA started to change hands rapidly. It was first sold to a British software house by the name of Gremlin Graphics in 1997, who hoped to benefit from DMA's technical know-how and expand their business interests. But after about a year, another studio, Infogrames Entertainment, purchased Gremlin, and along with it, the DMA offices. This complicated things quite a bit. DMA were still under a contract with BMG Interactive to develop Grand Theft Auto 2, and when push came to shove, Infogrames were forced to sell DMA directly to Take-Two, officially making Grand Theft Auto Take-Two's intellectual property. Many at DMA were greatly disappointed with this news. Having dealt with this kind of thing before, they were all too familiar with what would come next. So before long, many of the original developers responsible for DMA's defining titles parted ways with the studio, leaving those remaining to pick up the pieces. Prior to his departure, Mike still served a pivotal role in establishing GTA 2's signature dark atmosphere, In the months following the original game's release, Mike had overhauled the game engine, rendering as top-down worlds using a more sophisticated 3D graphics renderer, and incorporating new lighting effects that he picked up on from the team working on the PlayStation version. When he left, the designers that took over embraced this new artistic direction for the game, and started to populate the new game environment with these glowing lights, and then toned down the overall brightness, giving the game a uniquely dark and dystopian feel. The developers also wanted to improve upon the original game's generic mission structure, and introduce a new dynamic reputation system to give players more freedom of choice. And in the fall of 1999, DMA Design, with the help of the newly established Rockstar Games, released their second entry to the series, Grand Theft Auto 2, first for the PC and PlayStation, and then later for the Sega Dreamcast and Game Boy Color. GTA 2 is one of the more unique and unusual entries in the Grand Theft Auto series. Rather than being based on a real-world city, GTA 2 takes players to the futuristic dystopian metropolis known only as Anywhere City, where several powerful gangs maintain control of distinct districts. Players assume the role of a single protagonist named Cloud Speed, who is willing to do whatever it takes to climb to the top of the criminal underworld. Cloud, like the preset characters from before, is a silent protagonist who just accepts jobs and works his way up through the world of crime, but he is expanded upon a bit more in a promotional short film created by Rockstar's marketing team, highlighting his ambition and sociopathic tendencies. Even so, GTA 2 still doesn't offer much in terms of its story, and it's designed in a way that lets players tell their own story by creating as much chaos and destruction as possible. The biggest new feature in GTA 2 is the redesign to the mission structure. In each district, players must now carefully balance their reputations between the available gangs, displayed by a colored bar in the top left corner of the screen. If a player accepts a mission for one of these gangs and manages to successfully complete it, then they will improve their reputation with that gang, thereby unlocking more lucrative jobs later on. But if they fail that mission, or coordinate with a rival operation, then the player's reputation with that particular gang will decrease, locking players out of certain missions and turning previously neutral AI on the street into hostiles. This creates a very unique dynamic in GTA 2 that's not seen in any other entry, but it's not the only thing that sets it apart. GTA 2 also introduces a few new weapons to the mix, like the shotgun, some throwable explosives, and the electro gun, that further add to the game's semi-futuristic setting. Other changes include new vehicle upgrades that can equip players with things like front-mounted machine guns, redesigned player power-ups that make things like the kill frenzies clearer to the player, and new collectible GTA tokens that can be used to unlock wacky bonus challenges. But other than those few changes, and the ability to jump over vehicles, GTA 2 doesn't really do much else to differentiate itself from the original classic. And this became even more clear when the reviews for the game started to trickle in. Critics bashed the game for doing little to innovate from a technical level, stating that the game, especially on the PlayStation, looked about the same as the last one. Others pointed out that the gameplay had barely changed, and the new features weren't enough to hide the fact that it was basically the same as before. So while the initial sales for the game were impressive, with over 1 million shipped copies during its launch period, they inevitably slowed to a crawl, making GTA 2 a rare miss for the series. But GTA 2 wasn't the only entry to the Grand Theft Auto series to release in 1999. Around the same time that DMA were working on GTA 2, Take-Two Interactive had begun to make use of their newly acquired studios in the game tech purchase, and renamed the Canadian Alternate Reality Technologies into Rockstar Canada. This studio was then tasked with creating a series of small expansion packs for the original GTA, and was given access to most of DMA's source code to make it happen, which, as Mike Daly noted, is not really the most stable code to work with. There was only so much that could be added without the entire game breaking on them, so Rockstar Canada decided to instead focus on making mostly cosmetic alterations, and set their expansions in 1960s London. All the assets and UI were redesigned to fit this new theme, and a new story with some simplistic animated cutscenes were incorporated to help the experience stand out. Full development for this expansion took Rockstar Canada a little under a year, and in the summer of 1999, they released the expansion pack GTALondon 1969, with a follow-up prequel expansion only a few months later. In this first expansion, players are again given the choice between a series of preset characters, and are set loose to cause mayhem on the streets of London. As far as the mission format goes, everything is handled the same as the original title. Players accept missions from red telephone booths and run amok downtown, gutting down targets, smashing cars into lines of pedestrians, and fleeing from the police. Only, everything has been repurposed to fit within the game's new British backdrop. The AI traffic, for example, will drive on the opposite side of the road. Icons for weapons like the machine gun are redesigned to resemble British variants like the Sten SMG. And all the vehicles are now modeled after classic British vehicles from that era, including iconic double and triple decker buses. It's a pretty clever twist on the original format, but the cosmetic changes weren't enough to sway critical reception. The expansions were criticized for their lack of actual improvements to the core gameplay, and focused on the game's incredibly outdated visual design. And even though it still provided the same enjoyable experience as the other two titles, it didn't offer enough to grab their audience's attention, which was made evident by the significantly lower sales numbers. Even so, the development team behind the expansion weren't done quite yet, and a few months later released the follow-up GTALondon 1961. The second expansion offered several new vehicles and missions, along with a few minor gameplay improvements, including an option to upgrade cars with armor plating and the ability to perform drive-bys. But aside from those few add-ons, it too failed to innovate, and it ultimately was released as a free download on Rockstar's website, exclusively for the PC player base. GTA 2 and the GTALondon expansions that released alongside it demonstrated that brand recognition wasn't enough to deliver the same success they had experienced previously, and it was now up to DMA Design to reinvent the series and keep it from fading into obscurity. Following the lukewarm reception of GTA 2, the studio's founder, Dave Jones, decided that it was time to step down. Take-Two were now in a position to fully acquire DMA Design, and he knew that if he stayed, he would likely be stuck working on Grand Theft Auto games for the rest of his career, something that he was already tired of working on. So he resigned in 1999, and later became the head of a new Dundee-based game development studio called Real-Time Worlds in 2002. Replacing Dave as DMA's lead project director was Leslie Benzies. Leslie was another self-taught programmer that joined the Dundee office in '95 to work on an N64 game called Space Station Silicon Valley. This game was a real test for the team involved, as all the developers responsible were brand new to the studio and were working with tech that they had never worked with before. But even so, they came together to deliver a unique and charming experience, and the end result was well received by critics. But more importantly, Rockstar were impressed with what Leslie and his team had managed to accomplish, and tasked the group with tackling the next mainline entry to the Grand Theft Auto series, built to take full advantage of the upcoming PlayStation 2. To accomplish this, Rockstar secured an extended license to use Criterion's new game engine, Renderware, that had proven more than capable in the 2000 game Burnout. But unlike Burnout, DMA were faced with the daunting task of cramming all the complex city simulation associated with the top-down GTA series into a fully realized 3D world, without tipping over the memory limitations of their PS2 dev kits. They first started by planning out the general layout of the city, beginning with the basic geometry and roads, and then erected simplistic city structures to try and approximate the level of complexity that they were dealing with. Then, Leslie, together with programmer Adam Fowler and lead artist Aaron Garbett, came up with an ingenious streaming solution that effectively streamed the environment off the CD around a fully rendered polygonal object, in this case, a car. By doing this, they could circumvent the obvious memory limitations of the console itself to allow players to traverse through a massive open-ended environment almost seamlessly, a discovery that would inevitably influence the design of every GTA game moving forward. Now that they had the streaming method in place, the developers then began to populate the world with even more detail, modeling out tons of cars, designing weapons, and testing out the general player movement and controls. Meanwhile, a team of writers, including Dan Houser himself, penned the game's script, which would fundamentally transform the identity of the series. With the first few games recognized today as the 2D era, the plot felt disjointed from the gameplay experience, with mundane mission objectives having almost nothing to do with each other. But thanks to the new mocap studio DMA had purchased previously, GTA 3 would be the first entry in the series to feature fully voiced and motion captured cutscenes, adding substantially to the game's general tone and feel. They even hired a few big actors to take on some of the game's characters, including Robert Loggia, Frank Vincent, and even rapper and songwriter Keith Guru Elam. In the final years of development, things became even more hectic. The art direction underwent a number of major changes, with early builds of the game having more of a bright and colorful, cartoon-like quality to them. But this was later changed to accompany the game's darker story tone. And new visual effects like rain and trail blur were introduced to help give the game a unique visual flair. In June of 2001, DMA took an early build of the game to the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles, eager to show off the exciting new title that they had been working on. But to their dismay, audiences didn't seem all that interested in what they had to offer. It was almost as if people had forgotten about the Grand Theft Auto series entirely, and instead flocked to booths showing off new games like Metal Gear Solid 2, and a completely different Rockstar game called State of Emergency. Following this disappointing trade show debut, DMA returned home determined, knowing full well that what they had to offer was far more exciting than anything that was shown at E3. Then, just as they were getting ready to ship the game worldwide, tragedy struck, with the September 11th terrorist attacks in the United States. The attacks were not only emotionally devastating for the company, but even directly impacted Rockstar's headquarters in New York, as they were forced to vacate the building for over a month. What's more, investors started to worry that GTA 3's parody of New York would now come off as insensitive, forcing DMA to make several minor cosmetic alterations at the last minute, including remodeling the emergency response vehicles, disabling projectile collision with prop planes at the airport, and even adjusting the city's skyline to avoid any coincidental imagery. They even were forced to submit a new design for the game's cover art, resulting in the iconic comic book collage that the series continues to use to this day. Finally, after several years of development and an unforeseen last-minute delay, Grand Theft Auto released in October of 2001, exclusively for the PlayStation 2, with PC and Xbox ports releasing in the years that followed. Grand Theft Auto 3 brings players back to Liberty City, with an entirely brand new storyline completely unrelated to the original 2D era games. Players assume the role of a silent protagonist named Cloud, not to be confused with the character of the same name in GTA 2. In the game's opening cutscene, Cloud participates in a bank robbery with his girlfriend Catalina, but before he could reach the getaway car, Catalina double-crosses him, leaving him for dead in the alleyway, and he's stabilized by the police and subsequently sentenced to 10 years in the Liberty City Penitentiary. A few weeks later, while en route to serve his sentence, the prison convoy holding Cloud is ambushed by the Colombian cartel, who kidnap one of the prisoners and then destroy the bridge with an explosive, cutting off access to the central island. This is where the game begins, and players are given full control of Cloud, and kick off their journey through the criminal underworld of Liberty City to not only earn some cash, but exact revenge on Catalina. The game's core structure is eerily similar to that of the original GTA, with players taking on jobs for the Italian mob and then quickly escaping to the next area when things get too hot. But thanks to the new animated cutscenes, there's substantially more weight to each of the game's missions, adding actual personalities to the various crime bosses that players are forced to interact with.
I see nothing but good things for you, my boy.
Memorable characters include Cloud's friend 8-Ball, who accompanies Cloud during their initial prison break, Don Leone and his wife Maria, the crooked cop Ray Machowski, and the egocentric billionaire Donald Love, that has a bit of an interesting appetite. Like GTA 2's level environments, Grand Theft Auto 3's Liberty City is oozing with personality. From its absurd billboards and posters, to the ridiculous things pedestrians will say as the player passes by.
My mother's my sister!
Everything about GTA 3's world is purposely built to parody how the media portrayed American society in the early 2000s, with things like violent crime, prostitution, and corruption being a common attribute of the city's inhabitants. What really drives home the game's satirical nature, though, are the radio talk shows, especially the station Chatterbox FM, where real-life radio talk show personality Jeffrey Laszlo Jones not only plays a fictional version of himself, but co-wrote the script with Dan Houser, establishing a lot of the series' signature American cynicism.
Okay, and speaking of impossible, Jane from Cedar Grove is on the line, and she wants to talk about how difficult it is being a parent today. Hello, Jane.
Hi, Laszlo. I wanted to say something about these video games. They are warping our kids' minds. My son's dog, Bugle, got hit by a truck, and he says, Mommy, where's the reset button? Laszlo, life does not have a reset button.
Right, but this show does. I love that button.
But despite its major improvements, GTA 3 is still fairly lacking in the story department, with each character's personality being wholly attributed to common stereotypes. That again is deliberate, but doesn't necessarily make for the most engaging narrative experience. But remember, this was 2001. The idea that a game could deliver deep and well-crafted storylines was not at all in the norm, especially not in the action-adventure genre. Instead, GTA 3's true strength lies in its revolutionary open-world gameplay design, with a highly immersive world to explore, along with plenty of reworked gameplay mechanics and missions to help populate it. Thanks to the efforts of the programmers at DMA, Grand Theft Auto 3 is the first entry in the Grand Theft Auto series to feature a dominant third-person perspective, positioning the camera behind the player model rather than above. Though, if players want, they can still swap to a top-down viewpoint if they're feeling nostalgic. To make the most out of this new perspective, GTA 3 also features a more believable game world to play in. This interpretation of Liberty City isn't just a jumbled mess of streets and buildings like before, but rather a living, breathing world that's enhanced using a full day-night cycle and randomized weather effects. The city is broken up into 3 districts that each have a distinctive look and feel. The first district is Portland, an industrial lower-class area based heavily around New York City's Brooklyn borough. Here, players will experience the seedy criminal underworld at its worst, with gangs like the Italian mob engaging in open warfare with the neighboring triads, while hookers and pimps roam the red light district. The second area, only accessible after completing enough missions, is Staten Island. This is the city's business district, built to resemble New York's Manhattan Island. Here, there are towering skyscrapers, a football stadium, a casino, and a shopping mall that all serve as a backdrop for yet another criminal rivalry, this time between the Yakuza, the Jamaican Yardies, and the Colombian cartel. Finally, there's Shoreside Vale, where Liberty City's elite reside, with white picket fences, swimming pools, and high-end mansions. Together, these 3 districts, along with the added verticality, make for a much more intricate and complex game world, making it much easier to get lost within it. So, to help players find their way, GTA 3 also introduces the radar to the player's heads-up display that shows the player's position relative to nearby streets, along with any relevant map markers to help locate new objectives. To traverse through these worlds, players can catch a train and walk around, or more practically, steal any automobile that they see and drift around the city streets. Driving in GTA 3 is a big improvement over the 2D titles now that players can see more than 20 feet in front of them, though this new perspective also brings with it a more realistic physics system, with vehicles that can tip and roll, causing them to spontaneously combust and explode if a player isn't careful. All the vehicles you'd expect can be found cruising the streets of Liberty City, like sedans, sports cars, and trucks, many of which will only spawn in specific areas to add to the simulation. Though, if a player wants to, they can now deliver their favorite stolen vehicle to their personal garage at a marked safe house, and then save it for later use. GTA 3 is also the first entry in the series to allow players to pilot boats and airplanes, though the only drivable plane, the Dodo, can be challenging to keep airborne with its clipped wings. GTA 3 also sees a total overhaul to its on-foot character movement. Gone are the awkward tank controls from the past, replaced by a much more modernized control scheme, where the left joystick can be used to move the character, while the right joystick can be used to control the camera when in a locked first-person perspective. GTA 3 also is the first entry to introduce a sprint key, giving players an extra speed boost to evade danger, though it can only be used in short bursts at first, with Cloud getting tired and slowing down after a short while. The increased verticality of the level environments, coupled with the ability to control the camera, also plays a big role in how the combat is handled. Enemies won't just appear directly in front of the player after all, so a new aiming system has been implemented to account for this. For console players, the default aiming system utilizes a lock-on mechanic that can swap between targets within range of the equipped weapon. And on PC, players can make use of a new free aim system, allowing for even more precision. Weapons in GTA 3 include classics like the pistol, assault rifle, flamethrower, and rocket launcher. Though there are newcomers like the Uzi that can be used to perform drive-bys, a shotgun for close quarters, a fully auto M16 and sniper rifle, both powerful enough to dismember enemies, and throwable weapons like Molotov cocktails and frag grenades, useful for destroying vehicles and taking out hostiles hiding in cover. These weapons are gradually unlocked throughout the course of the campaign, and can either be picked up off the ground like before, or purchased from any of the available ammunition gun stores throughout the city. Though, players need to be careful not to be arrested or killed, as all of their collected weapons can still be removed after they've been booked by the police. The police system has also seen a big change with the leap to 3D. Like before, causing mayhem will attract the attention of the local authorities, giving the player a wanted level, only the max wanted level has now been increased to 6, with more nuance to each level leading up to it. At 1 star, the police are pretty easy to get away from. They won't actively spawn looking for the player, and instead will run up and try to arrest the player if they happen to be in the area. At 2 and 3 stars, the police become much more aggressive, and will actively drive around searching for the player, and will also open fire when possible. By the time the player reaches 4 stars, the SWAT teams are called in, who are much more heavily armored and carry automatic weapons. Roadblocks begin to pop up more regularly, cutting off key roads, and trying to escape on foot is practically impossible. If the player somehow manages to survive this, then they'll need to contend with the deadly FBI at 5 stars. And finally, upon reaching the maximum 6 stars, the Army, who will drive in big military-grade transports and armored tanks. It's a far more robust system, and probably one of GTA 3's most fun mechanics to toy around with, as escaping from higher wanted levels can be quite the challenge. To do so, players need to evade the police long enough for the stars to disappear. Though at the higher wanted levels, it can be extremely difficult due to the sheer volume of first responders on the streets. But it's still not impossible, thanks to the returning police bribe tokens and pay and spray stations, along with the increased verticality of the level structures that allow for some creative getaways. All these updated mechanics greatly transform the Grand Theft Auto experience, with more exciting car chases and gunfights throughout a densely populated city environment, providing hours of unscripted chaotic action. Though there's still plenty of structured content to enjoy as well, including over 50 mainline story missions, each more challenging than the last. Along with the many main story missions, there's several optional side jobs to participate in as well. These include payphone missions, that are typically simpler but don't advance the story, off-road missions that have players driving through checkpoints on uneven terrain to beat the clock, and RC missions that have players destroying target vehicles using a little RC car. Then of course, there's the vehicle-specific missions that will activate when entering a specific service vehicle. Jumping into a taxi, for example, will give players an opportunity to make some extra cash completing taxi fares. Entering a fire truck lets players drive around putting out fires, and getting into a cop car lets players complete vigilante missions, where the player is given a target to kill within a time limit. GTA 3 also sees the return of environmental collectibles, only this time in the form of hidden packages. There's 100 of these packages hidden around the city, often in hard-to-reach places, and collecting enough of them will unlock instant access to weapons and armor, available at the player's safe house. Collectively, Grand Theft Auto 3 is a massive improvement over its arcade top-down predecessors. Everything from the game world, to the story design, the combat, and the driving have all been redesigned to take full advantage of the new camera perspective. And the result is an experience that completely transformed not just the Grand Theft Auto series, but the entire gaming industry. The game soared to popularity upon release, achieving incredibly high review scores across the board, with many praising it for its unrivaled attention to detail and its incredible level of freedom. There were certainly a few complaints, like the game's cars that seemed to light on fire too easily, and the improved but still slightly clunky controls. But GTA 3 was still considered a masterpiece in game design by most, a reputation that helped it to achieve unprecedented early sales numbers. But as the game skyrocketed to the top of the charts, along with it came a tsunami of controversy. GTA 3's heavy focus on violence and adult themes sparked outrage, as many pointed fingers at the developers and producers for trying to brainwash children into committing crimes, while simultaneously failing to acknowledge its clear satirical nature or even the actual scripted mission objectives.
My general object of this game: kill as many people as you can, get as many stars as you can.
Some even blatantly misrepresented the content, making up features that have never been featured in any GTA game.
Get extra points for shooting somebody in the head as opposed to shooting them in the body. You have to wonder exactly what the values that we're teaching our children.
This is of course not the case, as GTA 3 removes the old point systems from the 2D era, and there's never any objective throughout the game that requires players to indiscriminately kill any innocent civilians. If anything, the built-in Most Wanted system actually dissuades overly violent behavior, punishing players for targeting unarmed pedestrians and preventing them from progressing further until they either let things cool down or are killed and subsequently stripped of their weapons. Even so, the controversy quickly became a hot topic in American politics, with representatives from both sides of the aisle pushing for increased censorship and regulations on video game purchases. But this rapid notoriety had the opposite effect on America's youth, as more and more people became aware of the game's existence, solidifying Grand Theft Auto 3 as one of the most well-known and influential video games of all time. Immediately following GTA 3's initial PS2 release, DMA Design's core development team commenced work on an expansion pack for the game that would include new vehicles to drive, weapons to shoot, and an extension to the available story missions. But after it became apparent that GTA 3 was a huge success, they decided to turn their attention to developing a full-fledged sequel instead. Before they could do this, there were a few logistical matters to attend to. Rockstar Studios finalized their acquisition of DMA Design, renaming them into Rockstar North, and the last remnants of the Scottish development team were relocated to a new office space in Edinburgh, where they continue to work on Rockstar titles to this day. By early 2002, full production on the next big GTA had begun. All the assets built for the cancelled GTA 3 expansion were then retrofitted for a new 1980s theme. According to an interview by Edge magazine with Sam Hauser, the 1980s theme was planned well before GTA 3 had even released, but it was cancelled before it entered full production, likely after the low reception of GTALondon and GTA2. But with GTA 3's unprecedented success, they felt the 1980s theme was worth revisiting, and the writing team began extensively researching media related to the time period, most notably Scarface, Carlito's Way, and a complete VHS collection of Michael Mann's Miami Vice. From here, the art team got to work sculpting a drastically different metropolis for players to explore. Aaron Garbett in particular spent a lot of time nailing down the look of the city's iconic architecture, ensuring that the neon outlines would glow along the city skyline. Another major focus for the development team was on delivering a more ambitious story. With GTA 3, DMA Design had always intended to give the lead protagonist full dialogue in order to tell a more compelling narrative. But because of their time constraints, they were ultimately forced to drop the idea. Though now that they had a little bit more time to work with and were raking in some serious revenue, they went all in and contracted Ray Liotta to play the lead protagonist. Along with this, Rockstar also secured the licensing for over 100 era-appropriate songs to be played from the vehicle radios, only further adding to the immersive nature of the experience. Then, after only 9 months of development, Rockstar North released the hotly anticipated sequel, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. GTA Vice City tells the story of Tommy Vercetti, a gangster sent to a fictionalized version of Miami, Florida, to aid in the expansion of the mob's influence during the coke-fueled 1980s. But after a major drug deal is ambushed, Tommy is ordered to track down those responsible or risk deadly retribution from his boss, Sonny Forelli.
You better not be screwing me, Tommy, because you know I'm not a man to be screwed with!
Like with GTA 3, Vice City's story pacing is maintained by the availability of its missions, with players needing to complete basic jobs for low-level crooks before moving up to take down high-profile drug lords and corrupt politicians. However, unlike GTA 3, Vice City's pacing hits a brick wall in its third act, where the game's finale is only made available after successfully purchasing enough business operations around the city and completing their associated side missions. It's a design choice that today would likely be frowned upon, forcing players to complete mundane side activities to artificially lengthen the experience. But remember, this was released back in 2002, so the open world game design to gamers back then was still pretty fresh and exciting. So much so that players likely already completed enough missions prior to reaching this junction in the story. Even so, this is only a minor pitfall when considering Vice City's impressive new story direction that's more engaging thanks to its fully voiced cutscenes, along with plentiful inspiration from classic 1980s cinema, television, and music. Vercetti's hot-tempered personality, for example, mirrors that of Scarface's lead character, Tony Montana.
I'm gonna shut that big mouth of yours. Stop running, you fat slime ball.
And the mansion that Tommy inherits partway through the game is similarly designed after Tony's mansion from the film's last act. An even more obvious reference is Vercetti's lawyer friend Rosenberg, who both looks and acts just like Sean Penn's character in the film Carlito's Way. there's also a ton of influence from the Miami Vice television series, with character clothing, music choices, and many of the missions being pulled straight from some of the early episodes. In fact, Tommy's friend, Lance Vance, is even voiced by the same actor that played Detective Tubbs back in the 80s, and shares almost the same backstory from the show's first episode. One of Vice City's most endearing qualities is its stylish atmosphere. The developers completely nailed the look and feel of 1980s Miami, at least in how it appears in film and TV. The world is rich in color, with patches of thick ferns and palm trees breaking up series of tan Art Deco structures, while aqua and hot pink neon lights glow along the facades. The game's heads-up display and menus similarly reflect this theme, with a blue and pink color scheme, and all the radio stations and vehicles play hit songs from the 80s, including Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, Toto's Africa, and I Ran by A Flock of Seagulls. On top of the refinements made to the game's story, GTA Vice City also builds upon the well-received gameplay formula from its predecessor, with a brand new environment to explore, lots of new weapons and vehicles, and some increased mission variety. The core gameplay remains mostly the same as before, with only some minor under-the-hood tweaks that aim to polish up GTA 3's rough edges. The player animations, for example, have been cleaned up a bit, making Tommy walk and run more naturally through the world. And the hand-to-hand combat has been redesigned to allow players to engage multiple targets simultaneously. The game's gunplay has also seen some nice changes, with tighter bullet spread and snappier auto-lock mechanics to make the action more responsive. On top of this, Vice City also introduces a plethora of new weapons to toy around with. Practically every weapon from GTA 3 returns, like the pistol, the shotgun, Uzi, and sniper rifle. But there's now higher-end alternatives for each of these weapons, including the Python revolver, a SPAS 12 shotgun, a Ruger carbine, and a semi-automatic PSG-1 sniper rifle. The only catch is that players can only carry one of each weapon type, and will need to ditch a corresponding weapon if they want to use something different. For players looking to get up close and personal, lots of new melee weapons have been introduced, most notably a chainsaw that will cause blood to splatter onto the player's screen when used to kill an enemy. Vice City even adds in some new special weapons to the mix, like the M60 light machine gun and the devastating minigun that can absolutely decimate the streets of Vice City. But the police are ready for this, as they've been upgraded to be more aggressive towards the player, and can now deploy things like spike strips that will pop the player's tires and cause them to lose control of their vehicle. Speaking of which, Vice City nearly doubles the number of vehicles over GTA 3, with dozens of new era-appropriate cars, trucks, and boats to race around in, including the return of motorcycles that had been absent from the series ever since the original game. Vice City is also the first entry in the series to introduce pilotable helicopters, along with a plane that doesn't have its wings clipped. And all these new vehicles come in handy, as Vice City's environment is tailor-made to take advantage of them all. Alleyways, for example, are sometimes too narrow to pass through in a normal car or truck, whereas motorcycles can slip straight through, making them extremely helpful when evading pursuers. And the boats and aircraft become incredibly important in the later half of the game, as players can use them to island hop more easily when trying to earn the coveted 100% completion. The overall level design of Vice City in general just has a more organic flow to it than the often ridge-like structure of Liberty City, giving it a completely new and distinctive feel. What's more, Vice City also houses lots of new storefronts to visit, including restaurants, bars, clubs, shopping malls, pharmacies, and clothing stores, many of which can be robbed at gunpoint. Old storefronts like Pay and Spray and Ammunition also return, though the latter is more properly realized, requiring players to now speak to the store owner at the counter and purchase weapons directly off the walls. In keeping true with the game's rags to riches mentality, players can now purchase additional safe house properties to save their game, and several business ventures that come with their own specific missions to complete and the option to collect a reoccurring monetary kickback from them. All in all, Vice City's gameplay design is a marked improvement over its predecessor. It takes everything that worked about GTA 3, like its open world structure and its third-person perspective, and builds upon it, with a more realized game world to explore and more things to do within it. Vice City was a huge success. The reception to the game was massively positive. Media outlets praised Vice City for delivering a better sense of story and atmosphere, while also praising the game for its improvements to the gameplay. One of the most common compliments given to the game was its brilliant 1980s Miami setting that helped deliver a distinctive personality that GTA 3 significantly lacked. But it wasn't without its problems. Some reviewers did cite various technical issues that hindered the action, including lengthy loading screens and the aged camera and combat systems. On top of this, Vice City also accumulated its own fair share of controversy, again being used as a scapegoat for violence in modern society. Newsreels portraying Vice City at its most violent quickly dominated the weekly news cycle, villainizing the game and the developers responsible. One group in particular cited a more specific reason for concern, claiming that Vice City's portrayal of Haitian immigrants, that make up one of the many criminal factions within the game, was detrimental to real-life Haitian Americans, and may incite violence against them. Protests regarding this issue were staged outside of New York City Hall following a report on CBS, eventually prompting Rockstar to add in a disclaimer, adjust some dialogue, and remove all mentions of Haitians or Cubans from later ports of the title. However, this would only be the beginning, as the controversy surrounding the Grand Theft Auto series would only continue to escalate alongside its rapidly growing popularity. In the summer of 2003, 18-year-old Devin Moore was placed under arrest in the state of Alabama for attempting Grand Theft Auto. He was only 18 years old, a recent high school graduate that had no prior history of violence or aggressive behavior. But while being escorted into the police station, Moore stole a handgun from an officer, killed 3 people, and then attempted to flee in a stolen squad car, only to be detained again shortly after. According to the Associated Press, his first response when he was recaptured was, "Life is a video game. Everybody's gotta die sometime." The story sent shockwaves through the media, reigniting fierce debates regarding violence's place in video games. And because Moore was identified as being an avid gamer, his legal defense even tried to make a case that games like Grand Theft Auto were to blame for his reprehensible actions. But the judge handling the case dismissed the connection, denying the defense from introducing the games as evidence, and the follow-up civil suit presented on behalf of the victims were similarly thrown out, striking a major blow to anti-violent video game activists. In the following years, Take-Two's legal teams would continue to fend off multiple lawsuits targeting their properties, mainly pertaining to Grand Theft Auto and its violent content, though, as it turns out, it wouldn't be the violence that would get the company into hot water. Meanwhile, back in Edinburgh, the developers at Rockstar North entered into production on a brand new property, hoping to capitalize on their growing reputation among their audience. This project, later given the name Manhunt, was built using mostly the same technology as GTA, though when looking at it, it's understandably difficult to tell. The game is basically the opposite of Grand Theft Auto, with much smaller, restricted spaces and a far more serious tone, making its extremely violent premise all the more shocking. As expected, it generated some major backlash from anti-violent gaming activists. Though this time, even some members at Rockstar Games felt they might have gone too far, admitting that, at least in GTA, you weren't being forced to perform horrible atrocities. But when reviews started to pour in, praising the game for its excellent stealth action and unique premise, it became clear that Rockstar weren't just chasing after a shock factor, but rather expanding the medium to appeal to the more mature demographic. Though of course, Manhunt wasn't the only project being worked on by Rockstar North at the time. Grand Theft Auto was still their keystone property after all. So as work was wrapping up on the PC version of Vice City, writers Dan Houser and James Worrell started to draft plans for the 3rd installment. When deciding on the next setting, they agreed early on that the final game in their 3D trilogy would be set in San Andreas, being as it was the only location from the original game yet to receive the 3D treatment. And in keeping with the new precedent they had set with Vice City, they opted to build their story around a distinctive cultural theme, this time, the inner city hood life during the early 1990s. As expected, a story about life in the hood, centered around a predominantly black cast of characters, was a bold direction for a team of Scottish developers to take, especially a story that was set to use the infamous LA riots as a backdrop for the action. So, to ensure that the topic was treated with respect, they also hired rapper, producer, and director Mark Jordan, aka DJ Pooh, who assisted in writing and provided consultation throughout the course of development. Additionally, the entire development team were flown to California to conduct field research in areas they planned to represent, including some of the more dangerous streets in Los Angeles, and then cross-checked architectural designs and landmarks with their New York offices to avoid any time-based errors. When they finally returned, the programmers and art department got to work on their most ambitious environment to date, a map that consisted of not one, but 3 major American cities, and everything in between. Their goal seemed somewhat unobtainable at first. Liberty and Vice City were already gigantic, taking up almost the entire game disk, with frequent load times in between districts. So the programming team came up with an elegant solution. Rather than having all the assets in the world like buildings, vegetation, and decoration load together in giant chunks, a new render pipeline would convert distant objects into lower poly variants, and materialize only when within range of the player. This allowed the art team to hugely expand the scope of the environment, with 3 massive cities only making up a fraction of the playable space. But they also didn't want this space to be empty, so they worked on implementing a new animation scripting interface that could be used to generate hundreds of unique gameplay mechanics and immersive features. Even the lighting systems saw some nice improvements, and borrowed lessons learned from the development of Manhunt to incorporate shadows that could be used by the player to hide from enemies. Finally, after an extended 2-year development period, Rockstar Games released the highly anticipated next When it comes to its gameplay design, San Andreas offers a significant number of changes, improving on aspects that worked well before while also adding new features to further immerse the player. The core gameplay remains the same as the past 2 games, though there are a few long-requested features to round out CJ's abilities. Players can finally swim in bodies of water for the first time, unlike before where touching the water would instantly kill the player. And short walls can now be vaulted over, making traversal on foot through alleyways and backyards more practical. The game's gunplay has also received some nice improvements, incorporating an even more responsive auto-lock aim system along with a new colored crosshair to telegraph the target's health status. Players can also crouch to increase their weapon stability, perform combat rolls, and sneak up on unsuspecting hostiles for stealth takedowns, similar to the stealth systems used in Manhunt. Most of the weapons available in San Andreas share fundamental similarities to the weapons we saw in Vice City, with 2 to 3 variants for each weapon type, and more or less the same balancing between them all. There are some newcomers to the arsenal though, like a Winchester rifle, a heat-seeking rocket launcher, remote explosives, and additional hardware like parachutes and night vision goggles. The vehicles have also been improved, with better handling and superior damage models. But it's the increase to the number of available vehicles that's most impressive here, with tons more cars, boats, and aircraft, along with a few more absurd options like hovercraft, go-karts, and the famous jetpack. The biggest and most blatantly obvious improvement San Andreas offers, though, is the extreme increase to the environmental scale. San Andreas isn't one city, it's an entire state, and it's filled with way more variety than anything the series has ever offered. The first area, Los Santos, is a large concrete jungle, with a maze of ghetto neighborhoods that act as an urban war zone. North of this is the rural countryside of Red County, that's loaded with tall mountains, thick forests, and winding rivers, along with plenty of redneck farmers, doped-up hippies, and roaming biker gangs. Further northwest, there's the game's second major city, San Fierro, that features lots of verticality thanks to its steep roadways, along with plenty of opportunities for naval action out in the bay. In the top half of the game's map, there's Bone County, a vast desert region home to several small towns, abandoned airfields, and a highly secure top-secret military base called Area 69. And finally, there's the Las Venturas Strip, where players can burn all their money on slot machines and card tables, only to make it all back in a daring casino heist. The sheer size and diversity available in San Andreas' playable space greatly dwarfs that of all previous entries in the series combined. But what's even more impressive is that this wide-reaching landmass is also chock full of things to do. First, there's the main missions, that seem to function the same as always. Players enter a mission marker, watch a cutscene, and then complete a series of objectives. But each mission does a better job of setting itself apart, with new scripted action set-piece moments and unique gameplay features introduced at a steady pace all throughout the length of the campaign. Early on, players perform relatively simple tasks like fighting gangsters, stealing cars, and robbing storefronts. But as the world begins to open up, the scale and general absurdity becomes more and more apparent, with players needing to navigate remote-controlled planes, burn down pot farms with a flamethrower, and even drive a motorcycle into the back of a cargo plane as it's taking off from an airstrip. But its attempt to stay at least somewhat grounded helps preserve its charm. Next, there's the optional open-world activities, many of which are specific to certain parts of the game world. In Los Santos, for example, players can roam the streets spraying graffiti tags and fighting for control of territory in gang wars. The Los Santos map is broken up into distinct territory blocks, with each color representing a different gang. And venturing into a rival territory can sometimes be deadly, especially when wearing the wrong colors. The player's goal is to try and conquer as many of these areas as possible for the Green Grove Street family. This is accomplished by traveling into enemy turf and killing waves of enemy gangsters, and then defending any conquered territory from retaliatory strikes. To sell the fantasy further, players can recruit gang members using their earned influence throughout the campaign, and can even perform group drive-bys just like the ones in the 90s hood films that the game tries to emulate. Another big addition to San Andreas is its new role-playing mechanics. Players can now fully customize the look and appearance of the game's protagonist, with businesses like barbershops, tattoo parlors, and several different clothing shops, each with an explorable interior and distinctive clothing styles. Players can also visit restaurants and choose from different food items on the menu to restore their health, but need to carefully balance this with regular exercise at the gym to maintain their stamina and strength, or risk CJ getting too fat or too thin. Players also need to maintain their driving and shooting stats by visiting schools and ranges to brush up on their skills, and can learn new techniques like fighting styles depending on their skill level. San Andreas also introduces a new girlfriend dating system, allowing players to befriend specific female characters and bring them out on dates, who will react to the player's driving speed and choice of restaurant, with a fun meter determining whether or not they want to be romantically involved with CJ after being dropped off back home. Other new open-world activities include mini-games like basketball, pool, and gambling, new business-based missions, home invasions, lots of new race types, lowrider challenges, demolition derbies, photography, dancing, BMXing. Simply put, there's a ridiculous amount of stuff to do in this game, way more than anything the series has provided before, making it the ultimate open-world sandbox experience. And as you can probably already most enduring legacy in pop culture was the infamous Hot Coffee mod. The Hot Coffee mod, if you somehow haven't already heard about it, was a fan-made modification introduced into the PC version of San Andreas a year after the game released. The mod unlocks an unused minigame that inexplicably made its way into the final code, where players could directly control CJ while having consensual sex with one of his many girlfriends. When news of this secret gameplay feature broke in 2005, all hell was let loose. Immediately, US politicians on both sides of the aisle condemned Rockstar and the ESRB rating system for failing to notify users of the adult-only content. Senator Hillary Clinton in particular pushed for legislation to be passed to further restrict access to adult themes in gaming, threatening to greatly limit game distribution with hefty fines and other penalties.
We are determined to stop a situation in which video games with pornographic and violent content are being peddled to our children.
Rockstar argued against the allegations, claiming that by modifying their game code, the client had violated the terms of agreement. But upon further investigation, the ESRB confirmed that the code was indeed still included in early copies of the game. And as a result, Rockstar issued a patch and re-released the game with the content removed, though a minuscule number of consumers actually took them up on their recall offer. And this was only the start. Rockstar also faced a wave of class action lawsuits, resulting in losses of tens of millions of dollars. The Hot Coffee controversy marked the first major loss for Rockstar. To this day, it's still unclear how the minigame made its way into the code. But whatever the reason, the Hot Coffee mod proved that the Grand Theft Auto series wasn't invincible, and Rockstar North would be sure to thank the senator for concern about America's youth with a fitting tribute in the future. In the years following San Andreas' incredible success, Rockstar North saw a major expansion to its staff size. The team had remained fairly small throughout GTA's 3D era, but with next-generation consoles looming on the horizon, and the promise of delivering more than just GTA games in the future, Rockstar saw fit to expand, and moved their studio to a larger space near Calton Hill. Meanwhile, Take-Two continued their ambitious expansion, picking up studios and transforming them into new proprietary 2K offices, along with additional studios under Rockstar Games. One such studio was a British portable game developer called Mobius Entertainment, who were responsible for a Game Boy Advance version of Remedy's first Max Payne title in 2003. Impressed by how this portable Max Payne game turned out, Take-Two purchased Mobius Entertainment, transforming them into Rockstar leads, and assigned them a project to create a similar handheld experience for the Grand Theft Auto property. But after seeing the potential in Sony's recently unveiled PlayStation Portable, they reassigned the leads team to start working on a PSP title instead, and handed off the Game Boy project to a third-party developer named Digital Eclipse, resulting in 2004's Grand Theft Auto Advance. GTA Advance takes place in the year 2000, 1 year prior to the events of GTA 3. Players assume the role of Mike, a typical low-life thug, who, along with his buddy Vinny, is looking to earn enough cash before leaving the country for good. But right as they're about to leave, Vinny's car explodes, along with all the money they had collected, and Mike vows to find those responsible and avenge his fallen friend. Throughout his vengeful journey, Mike meets up with plenty of other low-life criminals in Liberty City, including a few returning faces from GTA 3, and he proceeds to complete various jobs for them to get closer to the ultimate truth. Unlike its 3D counterparts, GTA Advance doesn't feature any voice acting or motion capture cinematics, resorting to still image cutscenes and text bubbles instead. Though the mission structure established with GTA 3 does remain intact, meaning players can visit markers on their minimap for specific characters that they meet and steadily grow their influence around town. And all of this is accomplished through the lens of the returning top-down perspective, along with a few other caveats to account for the Game Boy Advance's weaker specs. It's easily one of the least visually appealing titles in the entire franchise, with a limited color palette, flat environments, and some archaic animation designs. But the level layout introduced in GTA 3 is more or less included, and even features a few extensions to areas like the Western Island. Grand Theft Auto Advance even manages to squeeze in the optional vehicle-specific gig jobs like taxi fares, giving it a leg up over the classic top-down GTA games. But it's otherwise a basic and forgettable experience that failed to impress, and its resulting sales and reviews quickly reflected this, with many knocking the game for its poor visuals, boring soundtrack, and outdated controls. Though, fortunately for the Grand Theft Auto series, GTA Advance wouldn't be its last foray into the world of portable gaming. As Digital Eclipse took the heat for the first poorly received GTA game in years, work proceeded at the lead studio on another original Grand Theft Auto experience, built to harness the untapped potential of Sony's new PlayStation Portable. But to pull this off right, the devs at Leeds would need some help, so they reached out to Rockstar North, who let them borrow hundreds of assets and code that they then retrofitted to work within the confines of the PSP's capabilities. What's more, they even had Rockstar veterans like producer Leslie Benzies, lead artist Aaron Garbett, and writers Dan Houser and James Worrell all reprise their respective developmental roles to ensure it delivered the signature Rockstar level of polish fans had come to expect. Then, after a little over a year of full development, Rockstar Leeds released Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories, exclusively for the PlayStation Portable. Liberty City Stories, as the title suggests, brings players back to the hustle and bustle of Liberty City, 3 years prior to the events of Grand Theft Auto 3. Only this time, instead of tearing up the streets as Cloud, players assume the role of returning Italian gangster Tony Cipriani, who fans of GTA 3 may recognize as the mission giver with the less than grateful mother living upstairs.
Tony? Where the hell have you been? Not one so cool all the time you were away.
The story kicks off in 1998, with Tony returning home after being told to lay low for a while. In his absence, the Leone family, led by Don Salvatore Leone, had steadily been growing their influence throughout the city, and have set up shop in Eastside Portland to break into the prostitution and gambling rackets in the area. Tony, eager to jump in where he'd left off, is instead stuck working from the bottom all over again, slowly earning back his reputation to get in good with the boss. But as he rises through the ranks of the Mafia, he's thrust into a three-way gang war between the other families in the city, and the resulting fallout helps to shape Liberty City into how it appears in GTA 3. When stacked up to GTA's past two mainline entries, Liberty City Stories plays things a bit safe. The general plot bears some heavy resemblance to your typical American gangster movie, with the most obvious inspiration being Coppola's The Godfather. Though having a fully voiced lead protagonist does help to deliver a more focused plot structure than the last time players visited Liberty City, and to have all this delivered into a completely handheld experience was, and still is, pretty impressive. But even more impressive than this is the way Liberty City Stories preserves GTA's iconic open-world gameplay design. This isn't just a top-down spin-off with some mundane delivery missions. This is a full-fledged 3D-era GTA experience, tailor-made to take advantage of the PSP's hardware capabilities. Tony moves and behaves just like his mainline console counterparts, with the ability to run around the streets of Liberty City, steal cars, shoot bad guys, and perform drive-bys. The only caveat is that the PSP doesn't come with a right joystick, so the game camera can no longer be controlled manually while moving the player. Instead, players must rely on the game's more aggressive auto-center camera design, or optionally, hold down an aim button to switch the left thumb pad to control the camera instead of the movement. This is obviously not ideal, as trying to dodge bullets and keep track of where they're coming from can be difficult, but the improved auto-aim does help make the gameplay more tolerable. Liberty City Stories also doesn't make use of any of the new mechanics introduced in San Andreas, harking back to the slightly simpler design of Vice City instead. This means there's no swimming and no ledge vaulting, and all the complex RPG systems and minigames are stripped away. Though features that were introduced in Vice City, like motorcycles, unique weapon sets, and different character clothes, do help to make this return trip to Liberty City more engaging. Liberty City Stories also sees the return of online multiplayer to the series, albeit only between 6 players over a wireless ad hoc mode. Still, even so, this would be the very first time the series would offer a legitimate 3D online multiplayer experience in Grand Theft Auto, something that, as you probably already know, has become a pretty big part of the series since. Liberty City Stories was highly regarded by fans. Reviewers credited Rockstar Leeds for how much they managed to squeeze into Sony's handheld, especially the full Liberty City map. The graphics are obviously not quite as good as the console counterparts, with the draw distance often pointed out as a technical drawback, but it's otherwise a legitimate 3D-era GTA experience. In fact, it even received a re-release on PlayStation 2 in 2006, with superior visuals and a more traditional control scheme. But its real contribution was to the PSP, convincing gamers that the device could deliver true console-level experiences on the go. It quickly dominated game sales for the device, and because of this success, Rockstar Games were quick to greenlight a follow-up. After work on Liberty City had wrapped, Rockstar leads kicked off production on a sequel, this time letting players carry the beloved sun-soaked streets of Vice City in their pockets. Development for the sequel took considerably less time to complete, as most of the hard work converting the renderware engine to function on the PSP had already been accomplished prior. Though now that the developers were working on a title post-San Andreas, they were able to incorporate more of its updated gameplay mechanics and features, while also throwing in a few brand new ideas to help their project stand out. And within only a year of development, Rockstar leads released their second entry to the GTA series, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, first exclusive for the PSP, and then again on the PS2 a year later. Like with the last game, Vice City Stories is a prequel to its 2003 counterpart that helps to piece together events prior to Tommy Vercetti's rise to power. Players this time assume the role of Vic Vance, an honest military man just looking to earn some money to help pay for his brother's medical treatment. But after being reassigned to work on a military base for the corrupt Sergeant Martinez, he's caught up in some questionable activities and is later caught and dishonorably discharged. Now, out of options, Vance turns to a life of crime, trafficking guns, drugs, and involving himself in a massive turf war between the Cubans, the Cholos, and the Trailer Park Mafia. But it's when Vic's brother, Lance Vance, comes to town that things start to really get out of hand, as the duo get ensnared in a cocaine-fueled conflict with the notorious Mendez brothers. It's once again a competent rags-to-riches storyline that does a great job of paying homage to classic action films and 80s music, while setting up the events for its mainline console counterpart. Though its far more compelling main protagonist and better writing really shows, setting it far apart from its Liberty City predecessor. This release also features some improvements to the gameplay mechanics. For the most part, Vice City Stories handles a lot like Liberty City Stories, with the same awkward camera toggle to make up for the single thumb pad, and the D-pad helping to make up for the lack of clickable thumbsticks and rear triggers. However, many features introduced in San Andreas have finally returned, like swimming, flying, and riding bicycles. Vice City Stories also introduces a few of its own new features to the formula, most notably the ability to capture and maintain criminal rackets. Throughout the game world, there are several small fenced-off shacks, usually with a single vehicle parked outside. If the player blows up this vehicle, they initiate a hostile takeover, where they need to defend against waves of angry gangsters looking to protect their assets. Upon successfully defeating these enemies, players assume control of that business, and can complete asset missions to help increase their revenue. It's sort of a hybrid of Vice City's property ownership systems and the gang wars introduced in San Andreas, and the short, simple objectives attached to them make the criminal racket missions the perfect fit for a portable handheld. Other new features include a new vehicle-based side mission that lets players serve as a lifeguard, and the ability to repurchase confiscated weapons after being killed or arrested, along with several technical enhancements over Liberty City Stories. Vice City Stories was even more successful than its predecessor, earning higher average review scores and generating significantly more sales. With it, Rockstar leads had pushed the boundaries for portable gaming even further, delivering a nearly flawless port of the 3D Grand Theft Auto experience, up to par with the hugely popular Vice City and San Andreas. Its story was also praised, as it helped deliver a much more interesting protagonist, with far more personality and character than the cookie-cutter Italian mobster from before. With this release, Rockstar leads were successful in delivering on their initial promise of a title that would smash expectations of portable gaming. Though, instead of completing the trifecta with the San Andreas stories, they turned their attention to other Rockstar properties instead, including a PSP port of Rockstar Toronto's The Warriors a year later. And with that, the 3D era of the Grand Theft Auto series finally came to an end. While all of this was going on, the core dev team up north were gearing up for the next major step in Grand Theft Auto's evolution. For the past 6 years, they had made liberal use of the renderware engine for practically all of their games. But in 2004, Electronic Arts purchased Criterion, along with the rights for their renderware technology. This caused a major ripple in the industry, as most games developed for the Sony PlayStation 2 were built using this engine. And some developers, like Illusion Softworks, were even forced to restart development of their planned Mafia 2. This wasn't the case with everyone, though. For the first few years following the acquisition, Rockstar's UK-based studios were permitted to continue using the engine in accordance with their pre-existing contracts, allowing them to create San Andreas and the 2 PSP games. Though, after these projects were completed, it became clear that the next entry to the Grand Theft Auto series would need to leave renderware behind. This is where Angel Studios entered the picture. Angel Studios was a San Diego-based software development studio founded by Diego Angel in 1984. The studio had a slow start, working on various computer animation contract jobs with minimal revenue for years, until they finally made some headway working on games for Microsoft and Nintendo in the mid-90s. In the early 2000s, Angel Studios entered into a partnership with Rockstar Games and created racing games like Midnight Club and Smuggler's Run, using their own proprietary technology called the Angel Engine. And following the success of those two titles, Take-Two Interactive acquired them and renamed them into Rockstar San Diego, where they then went on to create a second Midnight Club and a linear action shooter set in the Wild West called Red Dead Revolver. In 2004, Rockstar San Diego became a critical component of Rockstar's continued success as a company. Now that EA owned Renderware, the other Rockstar teams needed a new platform to build off of. So Rockstar San Diego established a team of programmers to create a next-gen version of their Angel Engine, capable of improved rendering, lighting, and, with the help of third-party technologies like Euphoria, incredibly lifelike physics computation, resulting in the aptly named Rockstar Advanced Game Engine, or RAGE for short. This new engine was first showcased in a basic table tennis game created by Rockstar San Diego. But it wasn't until Rockstar North got their hands on the technology that the potential of what they had created would become fully realized. Now equipped with a suitable replacement engine, Rockstar North initiated work on their most ambitious new Grand Theft Auto since the original leap to 3D. According to Aaron Garbett, the goal for this new entry was to focus only on the series' most fundamental aspects, and then build around them with an unprecedented amount of detail to really drive home that this was a new era for the series. Because of this, the writers decided that it would be appropriate to return to Liberty City once again. Only this time, the recreation of New York would be more authentic and capture the extreme level of detail that players expected on new-gen consoles. As usual, Rockstar sent out a team to New York for field research, where they recorded videos of traffic patterns and captured hundreds of thousands of photos, and supplemented this with additional support from the head Rockstar game headquarters. Upon their return, the artists broke up into individual teams, each focusing on their own distinct area of the map, ensuring that everything from the buildings to the way people looked and behaved was unique enough to give the city a true-to-life feel. Adding to the authenticity was the extreme new level of detail afforded to them by the more powerful engine and development kits. Artists with architectural backgrounds helped to sculpt the facades of every building, while character designers made use of a special image metrics technology that allowed them to more properly telegraph characters' body language. Another major focus tackled early on was on redesigning the series' poorly aged combat systems. The 3D era combat, while serviceable, just wouldn't cut it for the experience Rockstar North were aiming for. So the team began to incorporate a more responsive auto-targeting system along with a new snap-to-cover mechanic that had become increasingly more popular after the release of Epic's Gears of War. Meanwhile, the writers had their own set of challenges to overcome. For the longest time, the story in Grand Theft Auto games had always felt like an afterthought, with some brief animated sequences before and after missions, with no real emotional tie to any one character. So, with the jump to next gen, lead writer Dan Houser sought to fix this problem and deliver something more meaningful and thought-provoking. Games had come a long way in the 2000s, with titles like Mafia and Metal Gear Solid proving the value of character development and mature themes. However, Dan never considered those games to be in competition with the likes of Grand Theft Auto, and instead looked to film as a benchmark. And now that the technology had caught up, he felt he could finally tell the style of story he always wanted to without resorting to cheap gags or lazy parody. Rockstar also abandoned their dependency on major Hollywood talent to deliver the dialogue, feeling that having known celebrities would detract from the realism of the experience, and so they hired several unknown actors that better suited each respective role. Finally, after 3 years of full development, the next generation of Grand Theft Auto had arrived, and Rockstar released Grand Theft Auto 4 for both the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in the spring of 2008, with a follow-up PC release later that same year. GTA 4 follows the story of Niko Bellic, a vengeful Eastern European ex-soldier who arrives in Liberty City on board an old cargo ship called the Platypus. Upon disembarking, he's greeted by his eccentric cousin, Roman Bellic, who had bragged to Niko for years about his incredible success in America. However, as Niko soon learns, Roman may have exaggerated a bit about his accomplishments, and is actually just a failed cab business owner living in a dirty studio apartment in one of the poorer areas of the city.
So, you full of crap or what?
What?
To make matters worse, Nico discovers that Roman's fiancée is possibly involved with another man, to which Nico violently responds, setting off a chain of events that eventually lead the two cousins to be pursued by the Russian mafia. Throughout the course of his journey, Nico establishes friendships with many diverse characters, including a Jamaican drug and weapons dealer, Little Jacob,
A boy for creep before him can walk, you know.
Yeah.
a steroid junkie and image-obsessed Brucey,
I got you, man.
and the volatile McCreary brothers, most of whom deliver their own distinct set of missions throughout the campaign.
Don't none of you worry about nothing. We're here for the bank's money. It's going to a greater cause. Shut up and handle the safe.
And all these characters are expanded upon further through extended conversations during long car rides that differ on repeat playthroughs. The game's narrative also paints a much less romanticized portrait of criminal life in America, with most of the characters Nico interacts with having some sort of drug addiction, often leading them to make poorly thought out decisions that either get them caught or killed. Even Nico, who remains mostly neutral with the people he meets in Liberty City, is still haunted by his past life, and finds himself relentlessly tormented by his desire for vengeance.
Maybe that is no excuse. Roman? Roman! Are you sleeping, you fat Come on!
Nico's immigrant background also plays an important role in the story's delivery, giving players an exaggerated perspective of America's post-9/11 hysteria and how it applies to an unobtainable American dream. Though that's not to say GTA 4 is all serious. There's still plenty of sexual innuendos, social commentary, and cinematic parodies all throughout its lengthy 30-some-hour campaign, including an intense bank robbery sequence ripped straight from the finale of Michael Mann's Heat. But even so, the story feels more mature than any of Rockstar's past work, setting the tone for more gritty and adult themes to follow. Then there's the environment. Liberty City, as it's portrayed in Grand Theft Auto 4, is a completely different beast than any of its early incarnations. It's not just a series of repetitive neighborhoods with one or two familiar intersections anymore, but rather a massive parody of Manhattan Island and its surrounding boroughs. There's Central Park, Flushing Meadows, Coney Island, the Washington Square Arch, Rockefeller Center, Times Square, and even the Statue of Liberty out in the harbor. That's modified a bit to pay tribute to one of Rockstar's bigger fans. What's even more impressive is the unbelievable attention to detail that developers crammed into every inch of this city. The streets of the HD-era Liberty City are densely populated with loads of varied NPCs going about their daily lives, taking cabs, eating food, throwing trash out of their car windows, and even pulling out umbrellas during the occasional rainstorm. The game's new physics system only furthers GTA 4's more immersive feel, with countless environmental props that dynamically react to outside influence. Trash lining the sidewalks, for example, will roll across the ground when kicked by characters, and can even be picked up and tossed as a weapon. Weak surfaces and objects can be torn to shreds with automatic gunfire, sometimes opening new points for attack. And vehicles feature a soft body physics system, allowing them to deform and contort in endless ways, all dependent on the amount of force applied. Even the NPCs have physics applied to them, stumbling backwards when shoved and rolling across the ground when hit by a vehicle. They even have a new injured state, where they'll reach for wounds and try to crawl for safety. Even by today's standards, the AI in Grand Theft Auto 4 is impressive. But it's not the only thing this game contributed to the series. In keeping with the precedent set by San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto 4's world offers plenty of fun activities to participate in outside of the main questline. Minigames like arcade machines and billiards return, along with new experiences like bowling, darts, and comedy clubs. There's even a fully integrated internet browser, accessible through computers at internet cafes, with a full network of fictional websites all parodying things like dating sites, politically fueled news outlets, and nonsense conspiracies. For players that just want a day off, they can stay in their apartment and turn on a TV, cranking up the volume and swap between different television programs, all fully animated and flanked by commercial breaks and references to other locations in the Grand Theft Auto universe. GTA 4 is also the first game in the series to make use of an on-screen cell phone menu, that players can use at any time to contact different characters, read their text messages, set up appointments, and even launch seamlessly into an included multiplayer mode, while further adding to the immersion. Which brings us to Grand Theft Auto 4's most infamous new feature, the friendships.
Hey Nico, it's Roman. Let's go bowling.
The friendship system is an evolution of San Andreas' girlfriend system, where players need to maintain a relationship with a character by taking them out on dates and keeping them happy. Only this new iteration is a little bit more involved, with 10 different characters, each with their own preference in activities, food, clothing, and vehicles to ride around in. By regularly treating a character to their favorite things, players will grow their relationship status with them, and eventually unlock special favors that can be called upon using an option under the phone contact. It's a very unique and ambitious feature that aims to further immerse players into Nico's world. Though, trying to consistently maintain all the relationships can be a bit much, especially when certain characters keep calling at the worst possible times.
Nico and Roman, we should go and get drunk together. Roman, I'm nervous enough about driving a truck full of explosives around the city for Mikhail Fausti. Anyway, I'm sorry, but if I get drunk with you and then drive this thing, I'll definitely blow myself up. I'll catch you later, cousin.
GTA 4 also sees quite a bit of an overhaul to its core gameplay mechanics as well. Because everything was built from the ground up on the new Rage engine, the player model doesn't move quite the same as he did in the 3D era. Acceleration is now more gradual to simulate forward momentum, and thanks to the implementation of the Euphoria physics simulation, Nico can topple over and ragdoll just like the rest of the game's NPCs, which makes for some painful looking tumbles, especially when hit by a vehicle. The driving systems have received similar updates. Cars have a feeling of genuine weight now, forcing players to think twice before drifting around corners. And a new suspension physics system allows the body of the car to independently move based on the car's momentum, while each tire responds to the various elevated surfaces. The damage miles that I mentioned earlier can even impact the vehicle's tires, making some cars unusable if they sustain enough damage. Other changes include new window braking and hot wiring animations when stealing parked vehicles, a free aim drive-by button that is compatible with SMGs, handguns, and grenades, and even the ability to catapult Nico through the windshield in a head-on collision, discouraging reckless driving. Then of course, there's the combat. The combat was a major focus for the development team as they really wanted to clean up what has always been GTA's weakest component. And with GTA 4, the series finally begins to resemble more traditional third-person combat systems today. The auto-aim system from the past few games does return, though enemy health is now represented by a series of circle-oriented notches that will deplete as more damage is dealt. This is so far just like how the other games handled it, but what sets GTA 4's aiming apart is that players can now use the right joystick to fine-tune their aim and move the circular crosshair along the enemy to target specific body parts. Shooting an enemy in the leg, for example, will cause them to trip and fall, while shooting them in the arm may cause them to drop their weapon, and shooting them in the head will always guarantee an instant kill, assuming they aren't wearing protective headgear. This system ensures that the game remains fully accessible for newcomers, as they can still continue to easily target center mass, while also providing more nuance for players to master, something that becomes extremely important during some of the more challenging combat encounters later in the game. This is then coupled with a new cover system. Like most third-person shooters today, players in GTA 4 can tap the cover button to have Nico rush for the nearest corner or low object to duck down behind. From here, players can move Nico safely into position and either pop up to fire again, or blind fire their weapon with reduced accuracy. What sets this apart from other cover shooters though, is that the system by which Nico connects to cover is fully dynamic and procedurally based, meaning anything that looks like it might protect the player will protect the player. This ensures that every environment is not built to look like an unbelievable maze of low walls, and encourages players to experiment with each battle to find effective points of attack. It's a huge step forward for the GTA series, with lots of exciting moments thrown in thanks to the increased amount of scripted set pieces during missions. And when combined with a more immersive environment and more realistic driving model, it really does feel like a true next-generation leap. But not everything from the 3D era made this next-gen leap. Property ownership, for example, is limited to pre-designated apartments, and cars can no longer be customized, save for the random paint job assigned when visiting a pay and spray. Most of the vehicle-based side missions, like firefighting and being a paramedic, are also absent, though the popular vigilante missions do return, with a surprisingly robust police database system built directly into each cop car. Speaking of cops, GTA 4 also redesigns how the police response behaves. If the player is wanted by the police, a flashing red and blue circle will appear around the player's cursor on the radar, indicating where the police have made contact. If the player can safely exit the zone without being followed, then the search will be called off shortly after. The catch to this is that with each additional wanted level, the zone gets bigger, with 6 stars covering up nearly a quarter of the entire map. Though, even at 6 stars, the police aren't quite as aggressive as they used to be, and will no longer call in the army, relying instead on lots of SWAT trucks, helicopters, and government agents to put Nico down. However, considering the size of Liberty City streets and the way players can duck into alleyways and play hide and seek with the cops, the improvements seem to far outweigh the few items that were removed. Finally, there's GTA 4's online multiplayer. This part of the game, that has since been shut down, previously allowed players to establish a peer-to-peer lobby with chosen parameters, and launch into the world with their friends or anyone else that joined. Lobby options included game modes like races, death matches, cooperative missions, and a special Cops and Robbers adversary match. Though the most common choice was the free mode option, where players could just roam Liberty City without any limitations, stealing from NPCs, fighting the police, and getting into unscripted trouble. It was an incredible experience back in 2009, as online gaming on consoles had finally become the norm. Though it's understandably not as exciting by today's standards. There was nothing to actually do in this multiplayer free mode, outside of killing each other and the random NPCs. Players couldn't even customize their character all that much, with only a few clothing styles and body types available to select between in the menus. Though, despite its aged design, it was still a revolutionary next step for the series that would help to set the stage for the series' future. When all was said and done, GTA 4 was a masterpiece. It received overwhelmingly positive reviews, with scores across the board averaging at or above 98%, and to this day still remains the highest rated entry to the entire Grand Theft Auto franchise. Common praise included the game's compelling narrative, its incredibly lifelike feel, and its unprecedented attention to detail. Others specifically praised GTA 4 for the quality of the voice acting and writing of its lead protagonist, Nico Bellic, whose hybrid of charming personality and vicious psychopath made him an instant fan favorite. Along with its positive reception, GTA 4 also saw an incredible amount of success in regards to its sales numbers, selling well over 6 million copies within the first week, and smashing records as the fastest selling video game of all time. But despite all of its success, GTA 4 still had its fair share of criticism, mostly directed towards the relentlessly annoying phone calls that interrupt the action. Another complaint brought up against the game was in regards to its depiction of drunk driving, in which players could visit the bar, get drunk, and then choose to operate a vehicle under the influence. But these complaints were all minor in the grand scheme of things, as GTA 4 still massively exceeded the expectations of both gamers and its developers alike. Immediately following the groundbreaking achievement that was Grand Theft Auto 4, Rockstar North put their nose back to the grindstone on a set of large expansion packs, paid for in part by a new timed exclusivity deal with Microsoft for the Xbox 360. According to promotional material ahead of GTA 4's release, expansions for GTA 4 were always planned, as the game's main storyline has several narrative forks purposely built in to allow players to explore these events from different perspectives. The first expansion, titled The Lost and the Damned, released only a year after the base game, and follows the story of Johnny and his biker gang The Lost. Players take on the role of Johnny, who's forced into a leadership role after their club president Billy Gray was incarcerated. But tensions rise when Billy returns to the club, and despite Johnny's best efforts to return to the way things were, a civil war breaks out, testing Johnny's loyalty and that of his friends. It's a remarkably different type of story than what's been presented before, with an emphasis on friendship and loyalty rather than a blind pursuit of power. But what makes it even more compelling is the way it's smoothly integrated into GTA 4's main plot, with actions performed by Nico directly impacting how the Lost biker gang reacts.
I just got word that Jason's been killed up in Broken.
The Lost and the Damned also features a few of its own unique gameplay features, not available in the base GTA 4 experience. In keeping with its biker theme, a new ride formation feature has been added, encouraging players to ride within a small zone in order to continue conversations with characters in the gang. Additionally, much like in San Andreas, players can call upon their fellow gang members to assist in missions, and can even fight for control at new gang war locations marked on the map, that will subsequently increase each gang member's combat stats to improve their effectiveness.
This what you want? That tastes nice!
Other new features include a bunch of new bikes to ride, several new weapons like shotguns and grenade launchers, the much-needed mission checkpoints, and a large clubhouse to explore, complete with new minigames and even a memorial to any fallen Lost members throughout the player's journey. It's a competent, albeit brief addition to the GTA 4 experience, and its unique tone, great storytelling, and well-implemented new mechanics were received extremely well by audiences. It too received highly positive reception, with reviewers praising the game for its clever twist on the newly established HD formula. But Rockstar weren't done yet, and a few months later, Rockstar North released their final expansion for GTA 4, The Ballad of Gay Tony, again for the Xbox 360 first, and then the PS3 and Windows platforms several months later. In this expansion, players take control of Luis Lopez, an ex-drug dealer turned bodyguard for a reckless nightclub owner known colloquially as Gay Tony. The story explores Luis's relationship with Tony as they deal with managing and expanding a nightclub empire in Liberty City. Although, due to Tony's ambitious nature, he often gets himself into serious trouble with local criminal outfits, forcing Luis to consistently come to his rescue. Along the way, Luis also assists his two neighborhood friends in completing amateur drug deals, helps Brucey stand up to his even more obnoxious brother Maury, and is forced to deal with the absurdly rich Yusuf Amir that doesn't very well understand the value of pretty much anything. Unlike Lost in the Damned, and even GTA 4, the Ballad of Gay Tony storyline is significantly more lighthearted. Missions regularly border on the insane, with players needing to base jump off of buildings, fly golden helicopters, and rampage down a freeway using an APC. It almost seems to be paying homage to old GTA games, with an increased emphasis on fun action as opposed to a dark character-driven story. Though it does strike a steady balance, as the brotherhood between Luis and his troublemaking boss Tony does make for a compelling narrative. Like with the previous expansion, the Ballad of Gay Tony also incorporates a number of new features into the gameplay. There's new vehicles, new weapons, and several new activities to enjoy. Instead of a biker clubhouse, this expansion lets players explore the ecstasy-fueled nightlife of Liberty City, with dancing, drinking, and even an underground fight club. The Ballad expansion also adds in a new job completion screen, giving players incentive to replay missions to earn higher ratings, and new base jumping missions that let players explore the city's untapped vertical potential. Overall, The Ballad of Gay Tony is a solid addition to an already phenomenal package, delivering more of what old-school fans wanted into the experience while also wrapping up loose ends in the story. It was received with similar praise from critics, especially for its more realistic take on an LGBT video game character, and earned positive reception for its enjoyable new gameplay systems. But more importantly, The Ballad of Gay Tony finally closed the loop on the central theme of GTA 4's narrative, allowing Rockstar North to finally press forward with their next groundbreaking experience. But before we get to the next mainline title, there was another Grand Theft Auto that released around this time. Following their success with their PSP GTA games, the team at Rockstar Leeds began to shift away from portable game development, creating ports for games like table tennis. But when Take-Two was approached by Nintendo to create a Grand Theft Auto title for their new Nintendo DS handheld, the job was given to Rockstar Leeds, hopeful that they could deliver something along the lines of their past PSP successes. Though, this time, Leeds couldn't port over the engine and its assets from the work Rockstar North were doing. The Rage engine was already incredibly complex, and trying to dumb it down to work on a handheld would inevitably result in something less appealing than what audiences expected. So, Leeds developed their own engine, based strongly on elements introduced in Rage, and transitioned the gameplay style back to its classic top-down roots, using GTA 4's version of Liberty City as a backdrop. The resulting game was 2009's Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars, the last portable entry and the last top-down entry to the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Chinatown Wars, as the title clearly hints at, tells the story of rival Chinese gangs in Liberty City, engaged in open warfare with each other over territory disputes and general power. The player takes control of a spoiled punk kid named Huang Li, who returns to Liberty City after hearing of his father's death to pay his respects and deliver a valuable sword to his uncle. But immediately after getting off the plane, Huang is jumped by a group of unknown assailants, who shoot him and steal the sword. After he recovers, Huang makes it his mission to hunt down his attackers, recover the sword, and restore his honor in the process. The narrative from this point strongly resembles classic Grand Theft Auto games, Huang working his way up through the criminal empire, accumulating power and contending with constant ambushes from either the police or rival gangsters. though the added Asian American cultural twist does help the title's story stand out, along with its new still-motion comic book art direction that seems to have been inspired by the comic book collage box art featured in the past several GTA games. As I mentioned before, Chinatown Wars returns the series to its top-down roots once more, though there's a few tweaks to how this functions, with some aspects feeling more immersive, while others feel even more arcadey. Breaking into cars, for example, sometimes triggers a hot wire minigame that requires players to rotate the screws to a panel and twist the wires before the car will turn on. But the driving has been simplified to account for the new camera style, with cars that auto-center more reliably and enemy vehicles that can be instantly disabled if knocked off the road with enough force. The combat system also features a new lock-on aiming system, making firefights easier to control, and a new immersive drug dealing system has also been incorporated that lets players steal drugs, stash them, and trade them with different dealers around town. There's a lot of great ideas thrown into this game that have still yet to be replicated, but unfortunately, Chinatown Wars would ultimately fail to live up to its potential. Sales numbers fell well below expectations, prompting Take-Two to follow up the Nintendo DS release with a PSP port a year later. But even then, sales still didn't line up with the sales that they had enjoyed during the series' heyday in the portable market, which is unfortunate because Chinatown Wars received exceptionally high praise from critics and fans alike. It was praised for its clever hybrid of 3D graphics and its cartoony aesthetic, and many appreciated the increased amount of interactivity meant to complement the Nintendo DS's dual screen. When all is said and done, Chinatown Wars is another fine entry to the Grand Theft Auto franchise that builds strongly on the established formula, but its lackluster sales, and Rockstar Lead's increased disinterest with portable gaming would make it the last entry in the series to be made available in handheld form. As the Grand Theft Auto series matured into its teenage years, its impact became even more apparent across the video game world. By now, practically every major project across the industry was aiming to deliver their own interpretation of Rockstar's groundbreaking open-world model, with massive level environments, light RPG mechanics, and an emphasis on world interactivity. Activision's Tony Hawk series, for example, broke away from its 2-minute skate session formula with its 4th entry, giving players a chance to explore large open-ended environments and accept jobs to progress the storyline. Other games like Just Cause, Crackdown, and Saints Row took things a step further, and incorporated their own tiered wanted level system, while upping the insanity in hopes of appearing more exciting and fun. But quite possibly one of the most successful adaptations of GTA's formula came from within Rockstar itself, with Rockstar San Diego's sequel to their wild western shooter Red Dead Revolver. Using the same engine that they had initially built, Rockstar San Diego decided to return to their spaghetti western adventure and expand it outwards, mirroring the highly immersive worlds of Grand Theft Auto. The game took several years to produce, with Take-Two investing millions of dollars into the project. In fact, it was so ambitious that Take-Two even had both Rockstar North and Rockstar Leeds fold in to help assist in its development. Finally, in 2010, their efforts paid off phenomenally, as Red Dead Redemption would release to unbelievably high critical acclaim, even more positive than GTA 4 before it. The game took everything fans loved from the Grand Theft Auto series, like its high attention to detail, its unlimited freedom and immersive atmosphere, and applied it into the Western setting, and coupled that with some of the best writing ever to come out of the world of gaming. But its most important contribution, at least where GTA and Rockstar are concerned, is that it proved Rockstar San Diego's worth within the company, and moving forward, major AAA productions released under the Rockstar banner would continue using this collaborative multi-studio model. Development for the 7th mainline title to the GTA series began before GTA 4 had even started to arrive on store shelves. The series' longtime writer, Dan Houser, saw serious potential in the interconnected storylines that started to materialize throughout the 3D era and the GTA 4 collection, and he sought to incorporate that concept as a fundamental part of the next title's narrative structure. In designing these interwoven plots, Dan decided to base each of the new characters around the personalities of what he considered to be typical mentalities of GTA players. There's the hardened veteran criminal who's seen it all and made it big. Then there's the complete sociopath who's more interested in causing utter chaos and mayhem whenever possible. And finally, there's the classic rookie, starting from nothing and working their way to the top, harking back to the design of practically every GTA protagonist before him. With these core character attributes now established, the next step was deciding on a location. Returning to Liberty City had proven to be hugely successful with GTA 4, as the new tech allowed Rockstar to completely reimagine the city and deliver something fresh and unique. But its urbanized setting also restricted the scope of the gameplay experience, making vehicles like airplanes unreasonable. So with this in mind, they decided to return to the West Coast again, as it offered more than enough space to work with. And after work had finished on Red Dead Redemption, Rockstar North began to send out research teams to Los Angeles to capture hundreds of thousands of photographs and videos just like before. Upon their return, the art team commenced work on the level design, planning out roadways, sculpting buildings, and erecting recognizable landmarks. But unlike with San Andreas, they agreed early on that this reimagining of California would need to focus solely on the Los Angeles area, as the increased level of detail required for the new HD era would not realistically allow for 3 entire cities to be recreated in a reasonable time frame. The programming team, now much more familiar with the Rage Engine's capabilities, spent a great deal of time fine-tuning the dynamic lighting and shadow rendering to function within the confines of the aging PS3 and 360 hardware. Meanwhile, the gameplay designers also looked to improve as much as possible, taking lessons learned from Max Payne 3 and Red Dead Redemption, while also backpedaling on the more realistic mentality incorporated into GTA 4's design. Additionally, the designers wanted to account for Hauser's unique 3-character story direction, and incorporated ways to seamlessly swap between the characters during select missions. After seeing how well this new concept worked, they then decided to expand the idea further, and started to incorporate the swapping feature outside of the missions, requiring them to build hundreds of unique scripted moments that would aim to trick the player into thinking that the characters were all living out their own virtual lives, even when the player wasn't watching them. As the game neared release, the hype mounted more than ever before, with every screenshot, every small minute-long trailer, every ounce of information blowing up the internet. Until finally, after 3 years of deafening anticipation, Rockstar North, in collaboration with practically every other studio under the Rockstar name, released Grand Theft Auto V, exclusively for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Grand Theft Auto V takes place in present-day San Andreas, and follows the story of several criminals as they pull off a series of major heists in the Los Santos and Blaine County area. Players take control of 3 different characters, each with their own distinct personalities, skills, and motives. The first character is Michael DeSantis, or Townley, depending on who you ask. Michael is a highly skilled ex-bank robber who enters the Witness Protection Program after selling out his crew during a bank job in the game's prologue. While this seems to go exactly as planned, Michael finds himself tormented by persistent guilt over what happened, and frequently takes it out in fits of rage, often directed towards his cheating wife, his desperate fame-chasing daughter, and his lazy, ungrateful son Jimmy.
I mean, why do I have to hold your hand through this whole midlife crisis bull?
On the other side of the city, we have our second character, Franklin Clinton, an ambitious young repo man raised in the hood and desperately looking for a way out.
Tell you what, my boy, you tell me exactly what you want, and I will very carefully explain to you why it cannot be. What?
After failing to repo a car from Jimmy, Michael decides to take Franklin under his wing, and after a violent outburst gets them both in deep trouble with a local crime lord, the two are forced to take down a jewelry store downtown to pay off a debt.
This is your moment! Please don't make me ruin all the great work your plastic surgeons have been doing. On the floor, now!
Which inevitably attracts the attention of the third playable character, Trevor Phillips. Trevor is simply put a psychopath. He's incredibly unstable, unpredictable, and highly volatile.
What kind of f***ing animal do you take me for? No, I didn't kill him. Oh, but I did kidnap his wife. Oh, no. Oh, what the did you do?
And serves a dual purpose through the story as both the protagonist and the antagonist. After seeing that Michael, his former partner in crime, has somehow miraculously survived the bank job from the prologue, Trevor decides to pay him a visit to get some answers, and is infuriated to find out that Michael had betrayed him, adding an uneasy tension between the characters that persists throughout the course of the campaign.
My job, my score, get your own!
But that's just the tip of the iceberg, as each character's actions set off a chain of events that result in the trio having to pull off various odd jobs for the US government, kingpins, and powerful investors, pushing all 3 characters to their breaking point as they work together to pull off the biggest heist imaginable.
Sweet mother.
The heists are a critical component of Grand Theft Auto V, marking a steep departure from themes explored in the past games. Many of the missions throughout the game involve sourcing material for the jobs, like gathering costumes, IDs, and necessary intel. Once everything's in place, players can then tackle the heists themselves, which can differ depending on the choices that the player makes early on. Players can, for example, go in quiet, knocking out the customers with gas and escaping before the cops know what happened. Or, alternatively, they can go in loud and dumb, with epic shootouts in the streets highly reminiscent of popular heist films. But it's not just the heists that deliver these high-octane moments. Practically every mission in GTA 5 is filled with exciting scripted action set pieces, with crazy over-the-top car chases, firefights, and enough explosions to impress Michael Bay. The tone is somewhat similar to what was established in The Ballad of Gay Tony, only the dependency on replicating famous action movie scenes has never been clear, with countless references and homages sprinkled all throughout the 20-plus hour campaign. And while, yes, this main campaign is technically shorter than GTA 4, the incredibly large and dense open-world environment more than makes up for it. GTA 5's map offers the biggest playable space of any Grand Theft Auto game. In fact, it's so big that it can fit the maps of GTA 4, Red Dead Redemption, and even San Andreas within it. Its landmass is naturally divided up into 2 regions, each with their own distinct look and feel. The southern region, and the one that sees most of the action, is the city of Los Santos. That, like in GTA San Andreas, is an exaggerated interpretation of the Los Angeles area. However, this version gets much closer to capturing the incredible scale and density of the real thing. The city stretches for miles all around, with practically all the most iconic areas represented in one way or another. There's Hollywood Boulevard, downtown, Venice Beach, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, the LA River, and Compton. That happens to include a cul-de-sac that bears a striking resemblance to Grove Street. North of the city limits is Blaine County, a massive open-ended wilderness that includes winding canyons, a desert airfield, rolling vineyards, thick forests, and the mysterious Mount Chiliad. That serves as the tallest point in the game, and quite possibly the entire series. There's a ton of sights to see throughout GTA 5's 75 square kilometers, and to supplement them further, a lot of these locations offer unique interactive activities to discover. Players can, for example, ride a roller coaster at the pier, look through telescopes at the observatory, or take a bus tour along Vinewood Boulevard. And all of this accompanies returning aspects of Grand Theft Auto level environments, including a diverse population of dynamic AI, lots more storefronts to visit, some of which can be robbed at gunpoint, an extension to the in-game cell phone menu, with a more robust internet browser built in, and a seemingly endless amount of more structured activities to participate in, like golf, tennis, yoga, scuba diving, and bounty hunting. I could go on for another hour detailing each new feature incorporated into GTA 5's open world, but it's something that really just needs to be experienced firsthand to understand fully. And it's not the only aspect of the gameplay design worth mentioning.
Back up, brother!
GTA 5 also sees a big improvement to its combat and vehicle designs. As I mentioned previously, Rockstar took lessons learned from their time working on Max Payne 3 and Midnight Club to tweak GTA's core features, making combat snappier and more responsive, and driving faster, tighter, and easier to control. The Euphoria physics systems from before are still at play, though they've been toned down a bit, allowing players to more easily identify when a target's been killed and preventing cars from annoyingly flipping over the smallest curb. GTA 5 also sees a big return for player customization, allowing players to freely modify their guns and ammunition, upgrade their cars with engines, body kits, and custom paint jobs, and even get a fresh haircut at the barber. Player stat progression also returns, albeit with more fundamental stats like shooting, driving, and flying, and no actual visible change to the character like weight gain. In fact, GTA 5 removes the ability to eat food at restaurants entirely, limiting health replenishment to the occasional wall-mounted health pack, candy bar, soda, or long nap. To help emphasize the game's signature 3-character design, GTA 5 also introduces new special abilities that can be activated after a brief cooldown. Each of these abilities is tailor-made for their respective character, playing into their personal strengths. Michael is a talented shooter, so he can trigger a slow-motion bullet time effect, much like Max Payne. Franklin is a good driver, so he can slow down time when behind the wheel, allowing him to perform unbelievable maneuvers. And Trevor is insane, so he can enter into a rage mode and turn his enemies into a red paste. Finally, GTA 5 sees yet another change to how the police function, reducing the max wanted level to 5 stars, and adding in new cones of vision to each officer on the radar, giving players the option to actively hide from the police within the search radius and lose their wanted level if they're careful enough. GTA 5 is simply put a masterpiece, Within only the first day, GTA 5 obliterated past sale records, becoming the fastest-selling video game in the history of the industry. Even now, it remains the second highest-selling video game of all time, with over 140 million copies sold since its initial release in 2013. But it wasn't just the hype that helped to sell it. GTA 5 was also met with near-flawless reception, with scores meeting and exceeding that of its predecessor. Some outlets, like IGN, even went as far as to say that GTA 5 is the best video game ever made. And it's hard to make a counter-argument against that. GTA 5 really does check all the boxes, at least in regards to what it's trying to accomplish. All the series' best aspects have been reintroduced in one way or another, and the game world offers more variety and detail than anything the series has attempted before. But despite GTA 5's insane amount of content, this was only the beginning, as Rockstar had simultaneously been working on a complementary online multiplayer mode that would change the franchise forever. Less than a month after GTA 5 hit store shelves, Rockstar unlocked an additional multiplayer functionality to the game called Grand Theft Auto Online that takes the world of GTA 5 and repurposes it to allow for persistent player progression in a constantly evolving multiplayer space. In it, players assume the role of a mute custom character that, with the help of various characters featured in GTA 5 and GTA 4, need to rise through the ranks of the criminal underworld, earning cash, weapons, vehicles, and respect as they seek the ultimate American dream. The narrative technically takes place prior to the events of GTA 5, often shedding light on what some side characters were up to prior to meeting up with the trio of protagonists in the main story.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant! I love you, in an appropriate way, I mean. If I didn't, you would be dead, of course.
Though, since its release, evidence suggests that the plot of the online mode has moved past the events of the 2013 narrative, making it the most recent point in the HD era's chronological timeline. Pretty much everything offered in GTA 5's gameplay is carried over for this online mode, including the controls, the weapons, the vehicles, and the various new customization options Los Santos has to offer. Though, thanks to years of continual content drops, the online mode features vastly more features than anything in the series' history, making it to many the ultimate Grand Theft Auto experience. There's nearly 700 vehicles players can drive, more than double the cars first offered in GTA 5. Countless firearms to choose from, thousands of clothing options, and some of the most flat-out absurd methods of transportation the series has ever seen. But this took years to cultivate, and in its earliest days, GTAOnline was pretty simple.
Oh no, how many times in 1 month?
In fact, it was criticized for being too simple. Once players were able to log in, following nearly a month of poor network stability, it became clear that GTAOnline really didn't deliver anything more than some death matches, races, and some repetitive small-scale cooperative missions. The entire experience is built around earning as much money as possible in order to purchase assets like property and vehicles to play around with in free mode. But because there was nothing to actually do in free mode other than fight the cops and rob from liquor stores, GTAOnline started to gradually develop a mixed response from audiences. A big point of contention was the unexplained absence of the promised heist missions, shown in the mode's reveal trailer, that would allow players to rob banks with their friends just like the single-player campaign. But Rockstar ran into a few snags during the development of these heist missions, admitting that they underestimated how difficult they would be to put together. And to hold fans over, they released several smaller content updates throughout the course of 2014 that would give players more vanity items to save up in-game cash for. To support these continuous updates, Rockstar introduced a new in-game purchase system called Shark Cards that can be used to convert real-life money into the game's fictional cash, useful for skipping mission grinds to unlock access to new content sooner. The Shark Cards have since become one of Rockstar's most crucial points of revenue for the online service, enabling them to continue providing players with years of new features without requiring players to pay directly for DLC. Though it has unsurprisingly developed a negative reputation for influencing every aspect of the online mode's design, usually making what should be simple tasks more difficult to entice players to purchase cards instead. While fans frustratingly waited for Rockstar to release their promised heist content, Rockstar then announced at E3 a new and improved version of GTA 5, built to take full advantage of the then new PS4 and Xbox One. This version includes a plethora of changes, chief among them being improved graphics, new weapons and vehicles, new missions, and the biggest change of them all, a brand new first-person perspective, allowing players to experience the entire Grand Theft Auto experience up close and personal. Following this next-gen release, Rockstar North turned their attention back to GTAOnline, and finally released the long-awaited Heist update in March of 2015. The Heist update added 5 sets of cooperative missions to play through, each with extended story cinematics, setup missions, and big finales, usually incorporating unique gameplay mechanics not at all seen in the core GTA 5 campaign. Along with it, players were also treated to tons of new clothing options, vehicles, and weapons, completely transforming the way players interacted online, making vehicles like the armored Kuruma almost mandatory in order to avoid getting gunned down randomly. But the Heist update's most notable contribution to the GTAOnline experience was its potential to earn players lots of in-game cash reliably. Players were no longer forced to prey on randomly spawning armored trucks or spam replays of Rooftop Rumble, but instead could participate in exciting bank robberies or prison breaks, all accessible through a special heist prep room hidden in the player's apartment. The Heist update still continues to be a major component of the online experience, though, as Rockstar would soon prove, this was only the beginning. A few months later, after Rockstar Leeds released a PC port of the game with even more impressive visuals, GTAOnline saw its second major expansion, the Free Mode Events update, aimed to inject life into the stale free mode experience. Now, players can participate in random competitive challenges across free mode lobbies, often requiring players to complete stunts with vehicles or fight to stay within a continuously shrinking zone. It was a big step for the online mode, providing an excuse to stay within a single lobby. And it's also notable for being the first update to not be made available for players on old-gen platforms, effectively leaving PS3 and 360 players behind. The next big update to GTAOnline was the Lowriders update, that aimed to reintroduce the hood life vibe of 90s San Andreas back into the world of Grand Theft Auto. With this update, players could customize select vehicles with a huge selection of new cosmetic enhancements, and also participate in several new gangster-style cooperative missions with returning single-player character Lamar. Then, there was the Executive and Other Criminals update. With this addition, players could now create free mode-based groups called organizations, that function a lot like the posses first introduced in Red Dead Redemption. Using this system, players can more easily combine forces and take on rival players together, using an assortment of new vehicles like armored limos with mounted machine guns to help keep their VIP alive. This VIP system was then expanded upon a year later in the Further Adventures in Finance and Felony update. That adds in new high-rise office buildings and free mode-based delivery missions, giving players new, yet tedious ways to earn money outside of the traditional heists. It was with the next update that things in GTAOnline really started to take a weird turn. With cunning stunts, players can now race in wacky, over-the-top race courses using brand new, larger-than-life track pieces that can send players boosting and flying across the city. This mode has since become a hugely popular addition to the series, with content creators and streamers regularly posting content of new, more difficult courses, enhanced further by an additional stunt race editor released shortly after. Because of its popularity, Rockstar has continued to support the mode, adding additional mechanics like vehicle transformation to help enhance it further, though the wacky colored ramps still remain separate from the constantly evolving free mode experience. Following the stunts update, there was the Bikers update. The Bikers update brings back lots of aspects first introduced in The Lost and the Damned, and reconfigures the biker clubhouse and rider formation to function within the confines of a multiplayer setting. Just like with the organizations, players can start up a biker club at any time in the free mode lobby, and then invite their friends to join in, where they can then cultivate various criminal enterprises by delivering product and defending against rival gangs. And then, after the biker update, there was the import and export missions, adding high-end vehicle theft to the list of illegal activities that players could participate in. In 2017, Grand Theft Auto Online underwent yet another major transformation, putting an increased emphasis on military hardware and explosive combat above all else. New updates like Gun Running and Smuggler's Run added in massive military facilities to the game, allowing players to cultivate weapons trade businesses and acquire a fleet of powerful military aircraft at their own hangar. This idea was followed up with the Doomsday Heist that introduced a second type of massive underground lair, while also adding in a new robust cooperative heist and a ton of high-end top-secret hardware to play around with. By this point, the Grand Theft Auto Online lobbies had turned into a confusing urban war zone, with players flying around in jetpacks, rocket cars, Back to the Future DeLoreans, and World War II bomber planes. So, to sort of reel it in, Rockstar released the long-rumored nightclub update called After Hours, adding with it the ability to purchase nightclubs and dance with your friends. It's highly reminiscent of the dance clubs in Ballad of Gay Tony. In fact, Gay Tony himself even makes the series return with this expansion, and offers players an all-new set of cooperative missions to play through.
And Tony? Yeah. I don't think you can say Gay Tony anymore. It's not PC. The internet will go crazy.
By 2019 and 2020, the amount of content releases for GTAOnline had slowed to a trickle. Rockstar San Diego's sequel to Red Dead Redemption once again required all hands on deck, leaving a skeleton crew behind to maintain GTA's multiplayer experience. And upon its completion, focus shifted strongly towards the ever-mysterious next entry to the Grand Theft Auto series. A few big updates have found their way to Los Santos, including a massive casino, letting players gamble with their earned money and rob the vault with a new set of missions, along with the ambitious Cayo Perico heist that takes place on a new, small island. But since then, things have gotten extremely quiet in the world of Grand Theft Auto. Which finally, after over 2 hours, brings us to now. Where on earth does the series go from here? The most obvious answer to some may be a reimagined version of Vice City, closing the loop and setting the stage for another generational leap. But with GTA 5 and its online counterpart still to this day dominating the sales charts, it's likely Take-Two and Rockstar have completely reevaluated how they treat the property. Another important thing to bear in mind here is that following GTA 5, longtime producer behind the Grand Theft Auto series Leslie Benzies has left the company, along with longtime lead writer Dan Houser, leaving veterans Aaron Garbett, Rob Nelson, and Andrew Semple to take over. With these major departures, it's very unclear where the series will go next, or what it'll look like. Though, what we do know is that following the massive development process of GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, Rockstar has acknowledged that moving forward, they would like to work on smaller scale titles that are more focused and more polished. Outside of that, there's really no telling what new incredible experiences the Grand Theft Auto series has in store for us. For the past 20 plus years, GTA has been a staple of the video game industry, letting players explore massive, sprawling cities without restriction, while simultaneously pissing off every politician that's ever laid eyes on it. And it's this constant balance of incredible gameplay experiences and the unnecessary controversy that will continue to drive Grand Theft Auto's unrivaled reputation as one of the greatest video game franchises ever made. But what do you guys think? Which Grand Theft Auto experience has been your favorite? And where do you think the series should go next? Let me know in the comment section. Also wanted to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon, including B-Man, Uriel Tomsov, and Chad Troutwine. Thank you all so much for continued support. If you enjoy the work I do here and want to see more quality content like this in the future, please consider joining the growing list of Patreon supporters, where you can get early access to new projects, behind-the-scenes content, shoutouts, and access to our private Discord to chat and play games with us. Your support is hugely appreciated. Also, if you want more regular updates on my projects, you can always follow me on Twitter. I'll have my link posted below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more reviews, comparisons, and documentaries posted every week.